scary. Terry's contract situation remains scary. They have been far apart. I'll put it this way. He has wanted metrics to the DK Metcalf contract, which is $32 million. I'm told the Washington Commanders have only been slightly above where he was before, which is $23 million. So take that gap. That's $7 or $8 million that they have to bridge. And Washington, I'm told, has gotten some calls about McLaurin. There's some interest league-wide. They have no interest in trading him still. So this is a classic standoff, which we're about to see.
Jeremy Fowler from yesterday morning. We did not get that onto the show yesterday. I didn't learn of it until afterwards. Max didn't either. And then he had something else to say and got into more detail about trade possibilities later on in the afternoon. Good morning. Football is back for our team. The first of 20 minimum comes tonight in Foxborough against the Patriots. Now, these first three, these preseason games, horrible to watch. Tonight, no starters will play. Last night, there were 3 games, and in the Cincinnati-Philadelphia game at the Link, the Bengals started with their starters. And Joe Burrow promptly moved the Bengals offense down the field on the first 2 drives for touchdowns. And at the same time, the Bengals defense couldn't stop Philly, who was playing nobody but backups in the game. There was a major injury in the NFL, not in a game, but there was a major injury in the NFL. We've got football back. And tonight, look, last year at this time, we talked about how the preseason opener against the Jets was really one of the more exciting, anticipated preseason openers in a long time because we were going to get to see what Jaden Daniels looked like, at least in a series or two. And he took that deep shot to De'Ami Brown on the audible, which he was not supposed to do. That created a lot of conversation. But as we went along through the rest of the summer and neared the opener, it was not necessarily apparent that he was going to do what he did. Nobody could have foresaw that. But the level of execution and understanding of the offense, we were all starting to learn from, coaches and coordinators and other players and joint practices. And it led into that opener where there was some excitement. Look, tonight's game in New England with nobody playing except backups. There are some important backup battles, and we'll talk about some of those for sure. Ben's going to join us at 12. Javier Gerretti, who covers and does a sports talk show in New England, covers the Patriots. He'll jump on with us at 11. I'm actually interested in that team. I think that team could be a sleeper. We'll find out how Vrabel intends to handle the preseason opener. But we have football back. You get to watch our team. They should break out the throwback uniforms for the preseason games, but I don't think they're allowed to do that. I don't think you're allowed to wear throwbacks in preseason games. I'm pretty sure that's a rule. Max, am I right about that? Do you think I'm right about that?
I think you are, because I've never seen one. In my time as a football fan. It would be nice though.
Yeah, it would probably help them sell some jerseys before the season starts. The Ravens last night beat the Colts 24-16 in a preseason game. Remember when the Ravens had that long winning streak, and Washington actually broke that winning streak. I believe it was Sam Howell who engineered the big preseason win to end the Ravens win streak. But Anthony Richardson got hurt on a free rusher that apparently he was supposed to account for. And by the way, I mentioned this yesterday to Robert in Annapolis that there was a lot of discussion in Baltimore about how good Keaton Mitchell has looked. Keaton Mitchell was, the guy last year who got off to a really good start and then got injured and missed basically 12, 13 games, something like that. But it was 2023 that he had the big year and he got hurt. But a lot of talk about him. He was like 9 for 68, average like nearly 8 yards per carry. Then in the very late game last night, Ashton Genty made his debut for the Raiders, and he must suck, man. 3 carries, -1 yard. That was it for Ashton Genty, the very highly thought of number 6 overall pick by the Raiders. from Boise State. Ashton Genty, 3 carries, -1. There will be people, in all seriousness, that will just say, oh, he looked terrible. This looks like a bust already. I might want to give it a few regular season games with an actual game plan and a starting quarterback in the game. Jalen Milroe made his debut for Seattle. No Sam Darnold last night. Drew Lock got the start. Jalen Milroe came in, threw for 60 and rushed for 40, had a 27-yard run. He is a running back at quarterback. That is for sure. So tonight we get our team against the Patriots. If you're even at all curious, I know some of you actually do enjoy the preseason matchups in the NFL. Tonight, Washington in their game against New England is a 6.5-point underdog. I would assume that is because the plan is for New England to perhaps play some of their starters. We'll find out when we go up to New England a little bit later on. Cincinnati last night, because they were playing starters, went from a 2.5-point underdog to a 6.5-point favorite over Philadelphia. I'm sure a lot of people bet Cincinnati on the first half line. They were down at halftime 24-14. Now, if you played them on the first quarter line, you probably won that. They were up 14-7 at the end of the first quarter. No smell test picks for preseason games. Have never done that and will never do that. Max, hit the what do you got sounder, please. So Dan Campbell, the head coach of the Detroit Lions, was describing something that the Lions in training camp have called the Hutch rule. The Hutch rule deals with one Aiden Hutchinson, who, through the first 5 weeks last year in the NFL season was a dominant player defensively for Detroit, and then broke his leg, broke his tibia, broke his fibula in week 6, and damn, did they miss him the rest of the way. Injuries are a reality in the NFL, and Detroit got decimated defensively as the season went on, but that was their biggest loss. During training camp, Hutchinson's been so good in practice that Dan Campbell has implemented the Hutch rule. The Hutch rule is when Aiden Hutchinson beats his lineman and registers what's viewed, because quarterbacks are wearing the don't touch me jersey, a hypothetical sack. The coaches now offensively have told the offense, Jared Goff and company, to go ahead and continue to play the play out as if Aiden Hutchinson didn't sack the quarterback. Because it's happening so often, plays were being whistled dead so quickly, they weren't getting enough work in. So they implemented the Hutch rule. Aiden Hutchinson's a badass. He is that next guy. He's got to stay healthy, obviously. But he is, I don't want to compare anybody to Myles Garrett. I truly believe Myles Garrett is slightly above TJ Watt in that conversation of the most menacing defensive players in the NFL. And I think that Myles Garrett's been that for a few years. But Aiden Hutchinson now entering, by the way, his 4th season. This would be his 4th season, I believe. Through 5 games last year, he had 7.5 sacks through 5 games. So he was on pace for basically somewhere around 26, 27 sacks last year before he got hurt. I mean, it would have been one of the all-time great sack seasons and dominant sack seasons in NFL history. They've got him back this year. They need him because they did struggle last year defensively. At the end of the year, and then certainly in the postseason against our team, who put up 45. Part of that was the turnovers. Part of that was the 5 turnovers for Detroit. But at the end of the year, they gave up 34 to San Francisco, 48 to Buffalo, 31 to Green Bay. They were reeling on defense until they shut down Sam Darnold in the game, the final game of the year, remember, for the 1 seed in Detroit, Darnold was horrendous. It wasn't as much Detroit as it was Sam Darnold just could not see it. Remember how many opportunities he had in the red zone, and they came away with nothing. But Aiden Hutchinson looking good and looking healthy in training camp. Detroit, they've got 2 new coordinators. That's the big change. But really for them, as much as anything, they just have to be healthier on defense. And it starts with Hutchinson. And then, in the back, they've got Brian Branch, who played very well, Kirby Joseph. They've got players. They've just got to be on the field for the Lions. I like the Lions in the NFC North. We'll get to our picks starting the day after Labor Day. So once we get past Labor Day, which is the first this year, so September 2nd, that Tuesday, we'll start our picks that week, making division picks, picking records, picking playoff games, playoff winners, Super Bowl participants, etc. I can tell you right now, I do like Detroit to have another big season. And if they're healthy defensively, be right there with a chance to be a 14-15, 13-14 team game winner. I mean, 15's a lot to ask for. It's what they had last year. They open up in the prime afternoon 4:25 window game at Lambeau on Sunday, September 7th. That will be a huge early game in the NFC North. The Hutch rule in Detroit. All right. So I contemplated starting with Terry today or starting with tonight. And I landed on starting with Terry because tonight is still, for the diehards. And I'm one of them, like many of you. So I will be watching and I'll be checking out to see how, some of these position battles are going, checking out to see if Jalen Lane looks the part. Like, is he going to be ready to be a part of the wide receiver rotation? Checking to see if old Bill Merritt, ends up getting something done in his first preseason game. I'm actually looking forward to maybe seeing Jalen Lane on a punt return or two. I think this is true, and I should know this for sure, and I didn't look it up. Kevin in Arlington will know. First touch for Brian Mitchell as a rookie in a preseason game, he returned a punt for a touchdown. And I believe that Darrell Green in his first preseason game was back on a punt return and returned it for a touchdown. Jalen Lane, more likely than not, is going to be the punt returner. That's what they were most excited about when they drafted him. Or Larry Izzo was the special teams coach. So if we can force a few punts tonight, watching Jalen Lane and seeing him in the open field will certainly be interesting. Look, the quarterbacks are going to be Josh Johnson and Sam Hartman. Not much to see there. Defensively, looking forward to hopefully seeing some Johnny Newton tonight. Hopefully seeing some Kane Medrano tonight. I would assume we'll see a lot of Kane Medrano. Would love to see some Trey Amos in there. But the guys that were, saw the most action, Dan Quinn said, in the joint practice weren't going to play. But he's a rookie. Will he play? Will we get to see him out there? Who knows? A lot of guys will be out there. Names we recognize, the Jeremy Reeveses, the Percy Butlers, the Tyler Owens from last year. I would assume that we'll see some Cleveland Farrell and some Javonte John Baptiste. And then offensively, you'll see some of those backup offense. I would think tonight we'd see a lot of Ben Sinnott. We'd see a lot of Luke McCaffrey tonight. So we'll get to that during the show at some point. But we got to talk about the Jeremy Fowler stuff. I guess I wouldn't do a lot more on Terry today if it wasn't Jeremy Fowler. Jeremy Fowler is a good NFL reporter with really good sources who's been right a lot over the years. I actually really like Jeremy Fowler. I think he does really a great job on television. He's very unassuming on television. But I played coming in, and we'll play it again right now. This was from Get Up, the Greenberg show. I think it was. It may have been the Stephen A. show yesterday morning. It was one of the 2 ESPN shows yesterday morning. It was Get Up. Okay, yep. So that's the Greenberg show, if you didn't know. This was Jeremy Fowler talking about Terry McLaurin and giving us some hard numbers both ways.
Terry's contract situation remains scary. They have been far apart. I'll put it this way. He has wanted metrics of the DK Metcalf contract, which is $32 million. I'm told the Washington Commanders have only been slightly above where he was before, which is $23 million. So take that gap. That's $7 or $8 million that they have to bridge. And Washington, I'm told, has gotten some calls about McLaurin. There's some interest league-wide. They have no interest in trading him still. So this is a classic standoff, which we're about to see.
Actually, it's $9 million. The difference between 23 and 32 is not $7 or $8 million. It's $9 million. And, you know, the actual average salary for DK Metcalf is closer to 33. So, you know, between 9 and 10 million is actually the difference if Jeremy Fowler is right, that the team is offered just barely more than what Terry's making right now, which would be 23 million. He's making 22 and a half. In terms of the average annual from the 3-year, $68 million deal he signed a few years ago. My first reaction to that is, A, it's Jeremy Fowler, so I should take heed that there is a good possibility here that he's close to being right. B, man, that is low, 23 million. C, has it changed since their original offer? What are they actually willing to come up to? You know, if the player is asking for 32 to 33 and the team started at 23, the team must say, look, it doesn't even make sense for us to negotiate right now. You are way out of line. And they might be saying, you're way out of line with your offer of 23 million. So there are a couple of things in addition to that being the immediate reaction. You know, one, it's Fowler, take heed. Two, man, that's a low ball offer if true. Three, it's a long way to get to some sort of middle ground. But what also came to mind are two things. Number one is it really speaks to the way they view him. Combination of age, combination of the player. They see him more in kind of the world of Cortland Sutton, who signed a 4-year, $92 million deal. Now, I think 23 is a starting point. Let's just say they were willing to go to 26. Well, that's still less than guys like DJ Moore. And, you know, a little bit more maybe than Devontae Smith, but less than DJ Moore, less than T. Higgins, less than Brandon Ayuk, less than Jalen Waddle. They don't see him as those guys. You know, big age difference for sure. We understand that. And that may be a big part of this. And then I also thought about something that I've alluded to for a while now. And it's just the idea that, you know, waiting for them before getting a deal done is better for cash flow rather than laying it out back in April or March or May or June, where they're going to have to pluck down 50, 60, 65, 70 million in guaranteed money. And make no mistake, the average annuals, it makes it easy for us to talk about, but it's the guaranteed money that's most important, as we've mentioned many times. And they're probably arguing about the guaranteed money more than they are the average. But anyway, the guaranteed money, if there's no contract extension reached, is zero. Terry McLaurin's contract basically is base salary and roster bonus the rest of the way. Base salary you collect as you go, as you're playing regular season games. His base salary for the upcoming season is $15.5 million. The roster bonus is $2.8 million. There's another roster bonus worth like $850. So call it 3.5 in addition to the 15.5. So call it 18.5, 19 million bucks. They're on the hook for this year. The cap number is a bit different, the way it was accounted for when the contract was signed. But that's basically what they're on the hook for. But that's a as-you-go situation. And paying, you know, up front, if you sign a long-term deal, is going to cost them around 60 million, plus or minus 5 to 10 million, right? So that's due up front. Not all of it's due at signing, but a lot of it's due at signing, and the rest of it goes into escrow. So they're looking at the player and they're saying it is not even close. He wants a number that's nowhere near our number. this negotiation isn't going to go anywhere unless he comes down. He's saying this negotiation is not going anywhere unless they jump up. And the team might just now be saying it's financially beneficial for us to not sign him to a contract extension, to make him play out the final year of his deal. He signed a 3-year deal, contract extension, off of what he had in 2022 for 23, 24, and 25. He is under contract to play. At 30 years old, he cannot afford to hold out. That would be, I think, more damaging to him. It would also be damaging to the team. And for them, it's like, we'll pay you this year. We'll have the flexibility at the end of next year if we want to use the tag. And then in 2027, maybe we'll work out something with you, or entering your age 32 season, maybe we think we can do better at that point. Maybe we've already done better by adding somebody in the 2026 draft or in 2026 free agency. But that 23 number is low. That's not what I think anybody reasonably following this contract negotiation would say is a good starting point for the team. And Terry's number, this is what we heard from Schefter. Schefter said considerably more than the Metcalf deal. But the Metcalf deal basically was $60 million guaranteed. By the way, all of it at signing. And the average essentially came out to 32.7, so just rounded up to 33. So they're 10 million, just call it 10 million apart. Can the team get to 28? Can he get to 28? 28 puts him in that T. Higgins range, DJ Moore range, Jalen Waddle range. I don't think Terry's willing to come down to that. That, if he's not, the team's not going any higher than that, if that's their starting point. So the idea that playing on his final year of his contract, after hearing that news yesterday, that increased significantly for me. Then there was more Jeremy Fowler from late yesterday. He was on a podcast, Max. What's it called?
Yeah, he was on a podcast with Rio Robinson. I forget the exact name, but Rio does a great job.
Rio Robinson is. I don't know that many. Who is he?
So Rio is he's kind of a fan journalist type guy. So he'll kind of, we have a bunch of these kind of in our market. But so he sat down with Jeremy Fowler yesterday to get a little bit more information on the where Terry McLaurin's negotiations are at.
All right, so we're going to play that for you when we come back. But this was even in many ways more interesting because it really brings back into play, I think, for some of you, or will bring back into play for some of you, a trade as a possibility. We'll play that for you when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. was on this podcast yesterday, the Rio Robinson podcast. There was a lot that he said, asked a lot about the Terry contract situation. Look, you guys may have a different view of Jeremy Fowler. That's fine. I'm not, I've mentioned this many times before. Obviously, Rappaport and Adam are two guys that get it right a lot. I guess Rappaport misses some every once in a while. But I think Fowler, as an NFL reporter, NFL analyst, I've just enjoyed him, and I've always felt like he's been on top of things. So we're not playing sound from a guy who, is a draft expert, third tier, who came up with something, a few weeks ago. This is Jeremy Fowler, and I think it's worth playing everything that he said. So the first thing that he said is he talked about sort of the trickiness, if you will, of the negotiation itself.
This is creating hostility and division amongst the fan base. It's either Team Adam Peters or Team Terry McLaurin. This situation, is it as tricky as it sounds?
It is, yes. This is a situation where the team and the player have different interpretations of the wide receiver market and what they're willing to do. And that gulf has been pretty wide, as opposed to some other situations where maybe it's a little closer and they're just going to haggle over details. This seems to be, at least from what I've gathered, more of a fundamental difference or belief in how this should go. So because of that, you're looking at a pretty big gap. I think Washington is willing to give him a raise from where he is, but not up into the money and the stratosphere that we've seen these bigger receiver contracts, where Terry can say, hey, you could probably argue Terry McLaurin's a better player than DK Metcalf, and DK Metcalf got $32 million. So it's a very hard discussion, and the way the market has gone with other players has sort of complicated the situation.
Yeah, I mean, he's speaking to the fact that this one is they're so distant from one another. There's such a different view of what's fair. Again, I don't think the team's right at something in the area of $23 million a year, a slight raise over what he signed for a few years ago. Guaranteed money is the most important thing, okay? It's the most important thing, but let's just talk in terms of the way Jeremy Fowler talked, and we had played that first soundbite for you in the last segment where he said, they're just barely above where he is now, which would be right around 23. And Terry is at 30, the DK Metcalf 32, and actually DK Metcalf's closer to 33 per year. So we're talking between $9 and $10 million a year difference. You spread that out over a 3 or a 4 year deal. It's $27 or $36 million worth of difference. Guaranteed money, again, the most important thing, but that's probably driving a much larger ask on the guaranteed money from Terry's side. This was Jeremy Fowler talking about kind of age and how that's played into the way Washington views Terry.
The age and the third contract is the issue here. I think that the Commanders look at that as something that should warrant more of a reasonable price, at least in their mind, and yes, at a position like receiver where it's about explosion and it's about keeping your legs fresh, that age 30 threshold can be important, as opposed to maybe some other positions where guys won't slow down as quickly. I think of Cam Hayward, defensive tackle in Pittsburgh, wants a rework contract. He's 35 and was just an all-pro. Not that McLaurin can't do that. It's just harder to do. So it's you also have to remember where Adam Peters, the GM, comes from. He came from San Francisco, where they have been unafraid to tackle difficult contract situations and let it get ugly and play out and have guys hold out, all those things. So he seems like an unmovable force in that way. And so that's why I just don't see a clear path in something getting done just yet. I think both sides are going to have to be a little more uncomfortable for a while. But I do ultimately think it gets done somewhere. You have too much momentum going on. You already have a lot on Jaden Daniels' shoulders. To ask him to carry the offense without Terry is a big one.
Okay. Look, I still feel like there's a chance it'll get done. But I'm wondering whether or not the team now truly is viewing the better financial path, the less expensive financial path that doesn't lock him in for more than 2 years. And there's no guarantee that they would lock him in for more than 1 more year because they don't have to use the franchise tag on him next year. And, you're in a position next year, if you had to tag him, there's less cap flexibility. They may be okay in looking at the 26 cap anyway. There's more from Jeremy Fowler, and we'll get to the soundbite in which he talks about the trade possibility. But this is what he got specific about what from DK Metcalf's contract Terry's looking for.
When they say framework or metrics from DK's contract, is it the average annual or is it the guarantees?
Well, I think it's both. In this case, I think it's all the above. But a lot of times the guarantees are the sticking point, where with Trey Hendrickson, for example, both sides in Cincinnati are comfortable with the money they're offering. It's just whether they guarantee enough for his liking. So that to me is a more progressed situation than McLaurin's. I don't even think they've been in that ballpark of getting close and you just have to hammer out guaranteed money. I think they're apart in per year average and everything else. And so Terry, at least you've kind of cut out the holdout money, right? You're taking $50,000 fines per day. Now that's over. And you don't really have to play right now if you don't want. You can make this more uncomfortable. You're visible and in the building, which makes this a talking point for the media. And the offense needs you. So, I think if you're him, you're hoping all of those factors apply a little bit of pressure to make Washington move a little bit. But so far, they have not been willing to do that.
Yeah, one of the things just to consider, because I think, this has, I don't know that it's really divided the fan base. There's definitely sides taken in this. And I think most people would prefer a deal get done and a deal get done that's good for the team and a deal that gets done that's good for Terry. That's without really needing to be said. That's not really the question and hasn't been the question. The question really is, who do you think's right in all of this? I have sensed and had a hunch that the team's right on this. Seeing 23 million as the opening salvo, if true, man, they're probably just as culpable. Terry's asking for too much and they're offering too little. And there's a big divide. Now, the trade request, there are 2 sound bites from Jeremy Fowler from this Rio Robinson podcast yesterday, where he speaks to the trade possibilities. This is what he said.
Is he actually willing to see a future elsewhere, or is this just a part of the process of locking in the contract to stay here in DC?
Well, it's multi-layered, right? Like if you're McLaurin, at this point, if you were to be traded, assuming you're getting a new deal out of it, he would welcome that,
Okay.
If you put him in some truth serum and say, hey, do you want to be in Washington, all things equal, I assume he would still want to be in Washington. Yeah. So it's the trade requests are becoming more part of the negotiation than an actual request in a general sense, because you see a lot of these players making them and they don't get traded. They're sort of either stuck where they are or they work out a new deal with their team. In this case, I do think the relationship has been fractured some. And I was told all along that Terry was willing to do whatever it takes to make this right in his mind, which is now requesting that trade. I guess you could call that the nuclear option. And he took it. And, I was being told that he would continue to do that until all pressure is applied. So it does appear that he's done all that there and done all he can. The only next step would be to just totally withhold services on game checks. And that's a big step. Maybe Washington would put him on some sort of reserve list and let him collect his paychecks while he sits. But that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, that's a whole different conversation. If he were to sit out regular season games. First of all, he's not collecting paychecks. Secondly, he's getting fined. Thirdly, there's this, thing from the collective bargaining agreement that Joel Corey wrote about yesterday. If he gets put onto a certain list, then his season's over and the contract doesn't toll. That's if he goes, essentially leaves the facility if he's not holding in anymore when the regular season starts. We'll deal with that when we get to it, because let's hope it doesn't come to that. But I think the key part of that particular soundbite is that, the relationship has fractured some, and that speaks to, it's become a little bit more than just business. It's become a little bit personal. I don't know. I think we heard some of that in the press conference that he held, after that Eastern Motors, commercial shoot. You could tell that he was hurt. It wasn't just frustration. It wasn't anger. He was hurt that they didn't see him the way he saw himself. The issue is, I don't think right now either one of the two sides are right. If Washington really is at 23 and it's not a 26, 27, 28 number that they were playing with to start with maybe the opportunity to get to 30, they're barely offering him, almost a cost of living raise, from where he was before. That's low. And I've assumed the Schefter report from last week to be, somewhat close, and he's been asking for too much. Now, there was one more about sort of the trade stuff. He's asked Jeremy Fowler from ESPN, how much trade interest has Terry gotten from around the league?
I'm trying to find that out for sure, but I was told that there's been a team that's looked into it that is, I guess you could say, pursued McLaurin via Washington, and my understanding is Washington still doesn't want to trade him, so I do think they're rebuffing any offers right now. I don't sense that they want to move on from him. Now, if there was a huge contract offer / multiple first-round picks or some huge package, I think Washington would look into it. But right now, that's just not the reality. And I don't know how much a team would be willing to offer as far as draft pick compensation when you have to turn around and pay him the money that you do have to pay him. So it makes that complicated. There's just not as big of an appetite for these massive trades for veterans right now because of the ballooning salaries.
Yeah, that's the problem, is the idea of trading him is you're going to be getting not a lot back, not enough back for a player of his caliber. And by the way, they'd have to find a team willing to pay Terry what he's willing to settle for. That may be, difficult. Now, it sounds like there may be a team or two willing to get to, say, 30. Maybe that's where Terry would drop to. And a guaranteed number that was close to what he wanted. I still believe that trading him is near zero. I just don't see where there's any value for the team to trade him. I can't imagine with a player like Terry McLaurin that it would get so bad that they just want to get rid of him. They just want to move on from it. That just doesn't seem like a possibility to me. The team needs him. Two things are true simultaneously. The team needs him, but they also don't want to pay him, at a high enough level. They think it's fair. He doesn't. We don't know what they'd be willing to come up to, and we don't know what Terry would be willing to drop to. I think we've always talked about somewhere in the neighborhood average annual of between 28 and 30. To me, 28 seems like the right number, putting him in that area of T. Higgins and a little bit, close to Brandon Ayuk, Waddle, but paying him maybe a little bit more because it's Terry. Like I've been fine with paying him, a premium for being a big part of the culture that they want to continue here in year 2. But that's not 33 and 75. That's 28, 29, 30, and 60, 55, 60, 65 at his age. So, but it doesn't sound like they're close. I just don't see a trade making any sense for Washington. And I don't see them ever getting to the point where, we just can't deal with this dude anymore. We can't deal with him. We can't deal with his agent. We're done with this. They need him, and he's under contract. Like we've said from the very beginning, he is under contract, and entering age 30, he can't hold out. That would be so damaging to him. And he's not going to gain enough leverage back unless every receiver goes down or every receiver drops every ball and they offensively look like a shell of what they were last year in the first game or two. And honestly, I could see them not being as dynamic, not as explosive, but I could see them being very efficient against the Giants in Green Bay if he decided to hold out. So, like we've talked about for a while, and everybody's got a different opinion. Mine is Terry's a really good receiver. He's just not the guy that you pay like a top 3, top 5 deal to. You just don't. He's not that guy. He's never been that guy. And entering his age 30 season, he's not going to become that guy. He's always been top 10-ish, plus or minus 2 or 3 spots. At least in the last 2 years. I think maybe go back 2 or 3 years, it was more closer to 15 than 10, 16 than 10. But he's not a top 5 guy. He's not a game changer. He's not a force feeder. He's really good, though, and they need him if they're going to make a Super Bowl run. And they should expect to have him because of something called a contract, which he has to perform the third and final year of the extension that he signed in 2022. What happens after that, I can't imagine him being unprofessional. I can't imagine him being a player that begs out at any point. I just don't see that with him, and that may be part of what's hurting him, is he's such a pro, and the team knows that. Now, there was more from Jeremy Fowler, which I want to play when we come back. He was asked about, the future and the Jaden Daniels deal in 2027 and whether or not that is a factor in all of this and whether or not he believes there's any room here for compromise and a conclusion that ends up getting Terry extended. We'll play that for you from Jeremy Fowler yesterday from the Rio Robinson podcast show. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
All right, it is Friday, August 8th, and our long national nightmare has ended. The Washington Commanders are back. They play a football game today. They play the New England Patriots in the first preseason matchup. No Jaden Daniels. Tonight, only some key starters that might see action. Sam Hartman reported to get the start. Kickoff should be around 7:30. The Colts quarterback battle just got a little bit more interesting as Anthony Richardson suffered a dislocated pinky on his throwing hand last night in a preseason matchup versus Baltimore. He'll be evaluated to see if he can make the start next week after Daniel Jones played a majority of yesterday's snaps. The Nats, they fall in a shutout loss yesterday to the soon-to-be Las Vegas A's by a score of 6-0. Mitch Parker gets credit for the loss, giving up 6 hits and 4 earned runs. Just 3 hits for the Nats as the bats have gone pretty cold as of late. Tonight, the Nats will kick off a road trip in San Francisco. Jake Irvin likely to get the start first pitch at 10:15. Nats on deck with Charlie and Dave at 9:45. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1 and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the streams and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
G from the shop. Kurt Cousins was at the top paid at one point. He was never a top 10 quarterback, Sheehan. Yeah, but he was 26 and he was a quarterback. Come on, G. You know the difference between quarterback and wide receiver. If you end up finding a quarterback who's 26 years old and can play in sort of a top half of the league number, you got to lock that guy up. This is not the same situation because because of the position, clearly, but Kirk was with an organization that was so dysfunctional, and they just kept lowballing him. And it just made it an easier decision for him to take the franchise tag money, bet on himself to a certain degree, no doubt, because he wasn't getting the huge, 45, 50 guaranteed deal. He was taking it, 23 million, then 25 or 27 million, whatever it was. I'm forgetting 19 and a half and then 24 or whatever in the back-to-back years. But, ultimately Kirk wanted to go to an organization that was filled with grown-ups because he was one. So Terry is actually in an organization with grown-ups now. I think Terry wants to stay here. Don't you guys? I think he wants to stay here. I still think the trade request is stock and trade. It's the move. It's part of the process. And Jeremy Fowler even sort of acknowledged that. And the next line is a big line. It's the regular season line. Are you going to actually hold out of regular season games? But he also, Fowler, suggested that the relationship was fractured. So there's just a little bit more Fowler that I wanted to play for you. This was him talking about the future, big hurdle to clear, which will be the Jaden Daniels deal. We're going to be looking at, perhaps the largest deal in the history of the NFL, and it could approach, $500 million when we get to the offseason of 2027. And they're planning for this. They have to. They've got to plan for this. So he was asked about whether or not that's a factor in the current negotiations with Terry McLaurin.
Well, I do think you're onto something there. Yeah, I mean, they have to budget for that. These deals tend to get done earlier and earlier, so Daniels will be eligible for a new deal in 2 years. And at that point, they will most likely have that discussion. I don't think there's any doubt. You're going to want to try to get ahead of a deal like that as opposed to wait. So the short answer is yes, I do think you're onto something there.
Yeah, I mean, look, the $6 billion 2 summers ago, the $100 million or slightly less than that just to make the current stadium up to code so fans can attend games. The big investment that they're going to make into the RFK site. By the way, next year is Tunsil. Next year could be Lattimore. Who knows? It more likely than not will be Luvu. You're going to have to get him signed, next offseason. There are going to be some big deals coming, but when we get to the offseason of 2027, Jaden Daniels is going to be the first $500 million quarterback. I mean, Mahomes was at $450 in aggregate value, $45 million a year. The average, annual high is Dak's $60. And he had basically, 230 of a 240 practically guaranteed. Received, by the way, the most it's signing for a quarterback was Deshaun Watson when he basically got all of it, all $230 million. I still have in the back of my mind, I think it's a long shot, but just cash flow and what these guys feel comfortable doing right now with all of the big expenditures they've had to make. And I just wonder whether or not that is playing a role in the first big player contract they've had to do. And then you look at the opportunity, because he's under contract, to not do anything right now. They don't have to do anything right now. They have the flexibility to have him play out his final year, and then they've got the franchise tag. And then 27 is his age 32 season. They may look at it and say, we got 2 really good years of Terry left. Why don't we go the least expensive route and the pay-as-you-go route? And then you might say, well, because that's not the way you take care of a player like Terry. Well, Terry wasn't their guy. and nobody gets paid for past performance. That's a myth. You get paid for what you're going to do. You do get paid for the kind of person you are if you are necessary to that organization culturally, psychologically, all of that. And I think Terry probably is. I'm sure they want him to be a part of it. This was Fowler about what he had said on Get Up earlier in the morning about what Washington had offered.
Yeah, when I mentioned that earlier on the show, I was partly doing some math, but what I do know is that originally Washington was only willing to acknowledge a slight increase from where he currently was. So if he was at 23, let's ballpark that at 25. DK Metcalf is at 32. There's your 7. Okay. When I ran that by somebody in the know, I was told that sounds about right. So I do think the golf is sort of in that range, and that's an issue. That's a big gap. So I don't know how they're going to close it. They would both have to relent and make concessions. Right now, that has not been the case yet.
I had not heard that one. Max threw it into the list. That's important because that's different than 23. 23 seemed really low, right? 25 seems low too. I'm not saying that 25 seems like the right number, but in terms of an opening number with the opportunity to get to 26, 27, 28, that seems less, I think, lowballish. So let's update the 23 to what he said later on in the day, acknowledging what he had said earlier in the morning might be a bit low. So if they're at 25, it's still low, I think. I thought maybe 28 and you work your way to 30, but they're at 25, which puts them right with Devontae Smith in terms of average annual. All right, that would be 3, 6, 9, 12, 13th highest average annual for a receiver in the league. It's probably where they see him, right around there. Lastly, Jeremy Fowler on if there's room to compromise.
Done before the season starts.
I think both sides are going to have to find a way to get a win in order for this to work, where maybe Terry wants a 3 in front of his per year average, right? Okay. He wants 30 or more, but then Washington's going to have to find something they're comfortable with. If they give that up, then maybe they have less guarantees on the back end, or, they can save money on the signing bonus, whatever it is. But both sides are going to have to find a concession. Nobody's going to be able to get a major victory out of this thing if they're going to come to a deal.
There you go. Sounds like we got a ways to go. I thought all of that was interesting. And for me, it's because it's Fowler. I think he's in the know. So let's sort of frame it as he framed it much later in the afternoon yesterday versus yesterday morning. Washington's been offering about 25 AAV. Terry's been looking for, that 32 to 33 AAV. That's a maybe a more doable divide. Javier Gerretti does a radio show in Portland, Maine. It's a Patriots station. We'll get a preview of what Washington will see tonight in New England. Talk a little Drake May with them as well. He's also a Skins fan, so he'll probably want to weigh in on what he has seen so far through training camp. That's next. All right, tonight, 7:30, Foxborough. The Pats and the Skins in the first preseason game for both. They joint practice the other day in Foxborough. I did read some of the tweets that came out of it. I think this is just typical of this time of year. From the Patriots side, Patriots won the day. Commanders came in here today, and they were not the better football team. From Washington's side, if a score was kept, wouldn't have been close. O-line was dominant. Pass rush already improved. JD to Ertz, unstoppable. Hard to really gauge a lot from a joint practice, but it's probably a bigger reveal than what we will have tonight. Javier Gerretti is a longtime friend. He is the host of the PM Jab on 96.3 FM in Portland, Maine. That is New England territory. At Havelhoff, that's at JAVELHOFF on X on Twitter. Javier joins me right now. I should mention that you are a Washington fan. By the way, how did that start? You grew up around here?
No, I'm a fan of a lot of the sort of stalwart teams in the NFL, and I just know what the Redskins have meant to the NFL for so long, and what they've gone through. So, the classic teams. I grew up a Giants fan, but the classic.
Oh,
teams,
I'm sorry.
Washington,
Okay.
Green Bay.
You and I have talked probably a dozen times over the last 10 years, at least.
Yeah.
I always thought you were a Skins fan, which is why you always knew so much about the team.
No, I'm just a junkie, man. I just love the league, and like I said, these classic teams that are the foundation of the NFL, like, just hold a special place in my heart, and Washington is one of those teams.
That's interesting, because I feel the way you do sometimes about teams, like. And I said many times over the years, as this fan base was suffering worse than any really in the NFL because of the ownership, that if it ever got back to the point where things were different and ownership needed to change, you and I talked about that over the years, and
Sure.
It did, that NFL fans, longtime NFL fans in general, would cheer Washington on. Would want to see Washington relevant again. The comparison I give, Javier, is, maybe you're a bit too young for this, maybe not, but when the Packers went basically 25, 30 years of not being very good after, the Lombardi, dynastic years, and then they got Brett Favre and they became a Super Bowl contender. NFL fans, longtime NFL media, they loved it. The Packers are back. I'm not comparing Washington to Lombardi's Packers, but the Gibbs Redskins, for fans of a certain age, resonate. And now that they're back, it's not the Redskins anymore, and that impacts some of this. But I think you're right. I think there is a feeling like, I'd love to see Washington, Dallas be a thing again,
No question. No question. And like you said, I'm old enough to remember Don Majkowski, right before they got Favre and the Packers not being very good. And I remember how exciting it was when the Packers started getting good and Reggie White went there, and it completely changed, like, that entire franchise. And they were back as one of those stalwart franchises. And I grew up with the Redskins being awesome and winning Super Bowls and, going to Super Bowls. So to me, in my mind, they are absolutely one of the pillars of the NFL. And it's easy to root for this team. Jaden Daniels is so good and so likable. But the NFL is better when the Redskins are good.
I think you're right. In the NFC East, in the games they're going to play against Philadelphia here in the coming years should be interesting. So before we get to the Patriots, what's your view of Washington entering 2025?
I think they're super dangerous. I think Daniels just, you don't get guys like that very often, right? And he's one of those really super elite guys. I have him in my top 4 in a big game, I think, and this might ruffle some feathers in your neck of the woods, but in a big game, I think I'd take him over Lamar already. I think he's shown that he rises to the occasion, and more than that, he just makes everybody better. Like, he made your coaches better. He made your defense better. Obviously, he made your offense better, but literally when one guy lifts an entire organization across the entire breadth of it, every position on the field, that's true greatness. That's what makes a guy truly great. And I don't think this roster is like super great. And I think that a lesser quarterback might not be able to do as much, but I don't think this kid needs that much. I think as long as you have him, you're dangerous.
You think they're dangerous without Terry McLaurin in the fold? He's going to be. He's under contract, but let's just assume he were to hold out for a few games. What do you think it would look like?
I mean, I think that's obviously, something that would impact the team. But honestly, with the way with Cliff's offense and the way you guys are so multiple and the way you can run the ball and the way you can free up people in the play action game off the dominant run game, yeah, you'd be better with him. But I don't think, you don't function without him either. And I'm a big McLaurin fan. I have a ton of respect for what he's done in his career with horrible quarterbacks on a bad organization. And he's shown up and worked. And I hope that they pay him. But I also think that what you guys have going is not solely dependent on any single player other, of course, than Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I had a friend of mine say to me yesterday that he heard me say that I still think the offense would be efficient. I still think there's a chance they would function at a pretty high level without him. And they said, you just don't understand the value of a wide receiver. And I said, you just don't understand the value of a quarterback who's multiple, like you just described. I mean, we have seen what 11-on-11 football looks like with a quarterback like Jaden Daniels. And look, the elite level quarterbacks in Kansas City and Buffalo last year didn't need a 1A wide receiver to win a lot of games and advance to the Super Bowl in Kansas City's case. I think they'd still be an effective team. I think they're better with McLaurin, Javier, but I don't think they would ground to a halt without him.
No, and you made a good point on the Kansas City thing. I mean, they let Tyreek go. They've been a very pedestrian sort of, sort of a pedestrian offense for the last few years. And Mahomes is good enough. They get to 3rd and 4, and he can convert 3rd and 4. And they're really good on defense, and they win a ton of games that way. So there's more than one way to win. And I think, personally, I'm not a big you got to put tons of money into receivers guy. I think, if the rest of the team's awesome and you want to go pay a receiver, that's great. But you better get your D-line right first. You better get your offensive line right first. You better get your running game right first. And then you can go get your big, sexy receiver.
So in the NFC East, who do you have, Philly or Washington?
Well, the curse, right? No teams won that division twice in like 20 some odd years or whatever. I still think Philly's great, though. Like, I have a ton of respect for what they do. It'll be interesting to see what their defense looks like on the back end. It didn't look great last night, obviously, with Burrow just, tearing them apart. But, a lot like you guys, they know how to win. They have their offensive line. They have their defensive line. They can win a lot of different ways. They get the most out of their quarterback. Like, I'm a Hutch fan. I don't think he'd be great in any system. I don't think he's one of those guys, but I think he's great in that system. And I think if they stick to that, they continue to pound the rock, and they rely on their offensive and defensive line, I still think they're probably the best team in the NFL.
All right. We are talking to Javier Gerretti. He hosts a show in Portland, Maine, and a lot of Patriots fans in his neck of the woods. Before we get to this year's team in New England, what was the net of it with Gerard Mayo? What happened?
Honestly, I just think he was a guy that didn't have any experience, and his isolation within the Patriots itself too was definitely a problem. Like, he didn't ever leave the nest and go create a network of coaches and people, and that really showed up. I mean, not only his inexperience, but the inexperience of literally everyone around him, every position coach, the OC, the DC, all of it just showed up. And it was really, I think they had a horrible draft outside of maybe they hit on Drake May. We'll find out down the road. But they didn't hit on anyone else. They didn't have a very good roster to begin with. And it just seemed like a guy that was in over his head, wasn't ready for the opportunity, and didn't really have a guy to shepherd him through it, right? They didn't have a real experienced GM. Like, Wolf has been sort of an office guy. I'm not sure he's even a competent GM, honestly. So I think at the end of the day, they just gave a guy that had no experience or not enough experience and not enough of a network and support staff around him to succeed.
So what is the early, thought on Drake May? There were moments last year as an NFL fan that I thought he looked the part, but what do people up there think?
Well, so all right, so up here, and you might have a feel for this. The Patriots media, because of the 25 years of unabashed success, is very protective of the team. They're very optimistic about the team. It's always seen in the most positive light possible. So I think most people up here think Drake May is like a half step behind Jaden Daniels or something, is going to be a superstar. I think a more realistic view of what Drake May was last year is, a kid that showed promise on a bad team with a coach that probably didn't know what he was doing, survived the year, definitely had some moments where he was good, but he also had a lot of bad moments. I mean, he throws the ball to the other team all the time. He had 10 picks. He could have been more like 15. He got pretty lucky with, some drop picks that definitely, should have been made. So I think there's a lot of talent. I think you like the kid's personality. I think he wants to be great, which is something not every player wants. So I think all those things, I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic, but I still think he needs to take a big step on the field, playing the game and take a big step, not turning the ball over, which he really did a lot last year.
How has Travion Henderson looked so far? I mean, that was a guy that a lot of teams who had a need for a running back were targeting end of first, early second. We were kind of hoping maybe late second, never made it there, picked, early second by the Patriots. What's the early word on him, the running back out of Ohio State?
It's funny. It's been a little quiet. Like, I think everyone sees his talent, and he's an explosive kid. We all saw what he did at Ohio State. But this Patriots offense is still such a work in progress. And I laughed at what you said earlier about the joint practice, because I got the exact same impression. I thought, I seriously doubt that New England was able to hang with Washington yesterday in any meaningful way. But this offense is not functioning at a high level at all in camp. There's been a lot of the defense winning the day, not a lot of offensive flow, not really a lot of. And with running backs, it's tough, right? Because there's no context, so maybe it's harder to get a gauge on them. But the early results, at least until yesterday's joint practice with Washington, were basically the offense is struggling. They're having trouble moving the ball. So not a lot of specific news on him in terms of what he looks like in these practice sessions. But I think they're all really excited about his ability and explosiveness and all the things he brings to the table.
Should be a good defensive team, right?
Yes, I think it will be. I think, they're very solid, obviously, on the back end. Like that secondary, if Gonzalez, comes back and is feeling pretty good, should be really good. My questions for them really are up front and, do they have enough pass rush? Like, Barmore's coming back this year. He showed promise earlier. He missed last year with the blood clots. He looked like he was coming on. Keon White's had a couple moments where he's looked okay. Obviously, they went out and got Milton Williams, and they got Harold Landry. So as far as that's concerned, I'm not sure how great this pass rush is going to be, but I think they're going to be a hard-hitting defense. You go against Spillane, who's just an absolute killer out there, right? So I think physically they'll be tough. I think they'll be better against the run. I mean, they were pretty horrible against the run a year ago. I think they'll be better against the run. I think their secondary is really good. So I think this will be a good unit that if their offense participates could be, better than that. But if their offense isn't moving the ball, turning the ball over, putting them on short fields, it's not a defense I don't think that can just win games on its own. I think it's a good complementary defense if your offense is functioning.
Excitement over Vrabel is what?
Very high. The fans love him. They remember him as a player. He brings experience. And the one thing, like we were talking about Mayo earlier, the lack of experience and lack of functionality really stood out and was a glaring thing last year. So I think fans are excited that, at the very least, this team will be run well, practices will be crisp, the organization will function the way an NFL organization should. And I think realistically, you can expect Vrabel to bring this Patriots team back to at least respectability, in the next couple of years. So, you have a guy that definitely knows what he's doing. Now, is Vrabel a great NFL coach? I don't think he's shown that yet, but is he a competent, good NFL coach? Yeah, I think he's shown that, and I feel like the Pats will definitely benefit from his presence.
I think he's excellent. I've been a fan. I think he's phenomenal with in-game strategy. And there are a lot of people, and I'm sure you guys have talked about this, that like New England to be a surprise. Maybe not, what Washington did last year, but a potential wild card contending team out of the AFC East. Do you agree with that?
I think they're going to be better, and I think they'll make a step. But I mean, we're talking about one of the flat out worst teams in the NFL last year, really over the last couple of years, right? Last 2-3 years, this team has been god awful, and they really haven't done very well bringing in talent through the draft. Now I thought they had a decent free agency period. I thought they, addressed some issues they really needed to, especially on their defense. But this offensive group is really inexperienced and not very good, honestly. We'll see what Diggs is, but 32 coming off an ACL, not a lot of receivers at that age, with that injury, even at that age, honestly, have been that productive. We saw guys like Julio, Andre Johnson, guys like that just fall off a cliff at that age. And I know Diggs looked pretty good as a number 2 behind Nico in Houston last year. And also Tank Dell, like he's the focus of this passing offense. I'm not sure that that's going to go very well. So between him, Matt Collins, Demario Douglas, Kyle Williams, a rookie, Keyshawn Boutte, who, made some plays last year. I think Bourne's hurt right now. Like, they got, in my opinion, pretty below average receiver room. Now, Diggs is what he used to be. Maybe that changes, but I just don't think so. And then you look at this offensive line. I mean, Garrett Bradbury's not very good. Morgan Moses is solid, solid veteran to play right tackle if he can get through the season. He's been pretty healthy most of the time. Underwinter's a good player. But you got Jared Wilson winning that left guard job, at least right now. He's a rookie, the kid out of Georgia. And then Will Campbell, as we all know, the first-round pick of left tackle, who, honestly, by all reports, has really struggled so far. So I'm not sure how good this offensive line is going to be, and I'm not sure how good their pass catchers are. So I think that this is going to be an offense that still struggles at times to move the ball, doesn't score a ton of points. So I think they'll be better. I think they'll be more functional. I think they'll be in a lot more games. I think they'll win more games than last year. But, man, like so many things have to go their way on offense for this to be a legitimate playoff team that I just don't think they get there this year.
You just reminded me, that's where Kyle Williams landed, New England. He was one of my favorite receivers in the draft this year. What's the word on him, the kid out of Washington State?
He's been okay. Not a lot of reports of wow plays, but he's been solid, I think. But I definitely still behind Diggs, Mack, and Douglas, at least at this point. Bourne is fun. It's hard to know where Bourne's going to fit in this, and also with Boutte. But I think what Williams has been fine. I don't think it's been bad. I don't think it's been oh my God, Kyle Williams is just tearing this place apart. But I think he's been fine so far.
All right, what is Vrabel planning to do tonight with starters?
I have to, I feel dumb. I'm not sure yet what exactly they're going to do. I don't think May's playing tonight. I think they're going to go with Dobbs, but I think you'll see Wilson and Campbell out there. So I think the starting offensive line is going to play a little bit, but I haven't seen yet what they're doing with May.
Yeah, I'm looking at the point spread jumped up to New England -6.5. So I'm guessing that they're going to play more starters, or at least the belief is, because Washington isn't playing any starters apparently tonight. Right. Thanks for doing this. Really appreciate it. Oh, you have a Heisman vote?
I do. Yeah.
So Arch this year, he's the favorite, right? Is Klubnik or Nussmeier?
Well, I think it's good. I think Arch is a favorite because he's so famous. Yeah. I think Klubnik. It's a good question. I think it's gonna be a really interesting year in college football, and what how many of these quarterbacks actually end up being good, and which guys end up being good. And I like the kid from Kansas State a lot. Maybe he's a sleeper for the Heisman this year. We'll see, but I think Arch. If Arch plays well and puts up numbers, they're probably gonna give it to him.
He plays in that week 0 game in Dublin against Iowa State. I actually like Lenore Sellers a lot, and I just pulled up the odds right now. He's plus 1,800. Arch is the favorite. Nussmeier, Klubnik. I'm not a big Klubnik guy. I don't get the.
I'm not either. Yeah.
I've seen him projected number 1 next year, and I have not seen it. I don't think Nussmeier's a number 1 pick. I don't think Klubnik is. I think it's going to be interesting to see what Drew Allard does this year, but I like Lenore Sellers. I mean, he's true dual threat exciting at South Carolina.
Yeah, big, and they won a lot of games last year they shouldn't have won because of him.
You're right.
So,
yeah, you're right. All right, thanks for doing this. Hope you're well.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Kevin. Really appreciate it.
Javier Gerretti, everybody, 96.3 FM, the PM Jab in Portland, Maine. They are a Patriot station. You can follow him on X on Twitter at Havelhoff. The first part of Havel is with a J. All right, when we come back, why, if you're going to watch tonight, are you going to watch tonight? Tell me, 301-230-0980. What are you interested in tonight? If you're going to watch, and these are hard watches, understood, but if you're going to watch, tell me why. Tell me what you're looking to see tonight. No starters expected to play. 301-230-0980. Phone lines are open. I'll give you my answer when we come back. Max will as well. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. Big NFL story yesterday was Rashawn Slater going down and rupturing the patellar tendon in practice for the Chargers out in California. He is done for the season. That comes after 11 days ago, Slater signed a 4-year, $113 million contract extension, including $92 million guaranteed. That deal made him the highest paid offensive lineman by average annual in NFL history. 11 days later, he is done for the season. I was reading something about ruptured patellar tendon injuries, especially if they are severe, that they're actually very difficult to come back and ever play at the same level. Man, you talk about bad luck for the Chargers. Washington faces L.A., San Diego in week 5. No Rashawn Slater. That was a ball player in his first several years in the NFL out of Northwestern. Really, really unfortunate for him. All right. If you're going to watch tonight, and I know a lot of people that don't watch these games, and trust me, if I didn't have to watch an NFL preseason game, I would turn it on for a little bit because it's just so comforting to see football on TV. Like I flipped around last night and watched the Ravens run locally. They weren't on the NFL network. I don't know why we carry Ravens preseason games locally, but whatever. That I'm sure Channel 7 has good reason for it. And then watch some of the NFL Network highlights of Cincinnati, Philly, and then when the Raiders-Seattle game started. But I think it's the hardest to watch in sports. I mean, I'm not a big spring training guy, so it's not like I'm watching a lot of spring training games, but spring training is a totally different element. It's a trip that people make. People love it, down in Florida, out in Arizona. Preseason NBA is so short and it's so meaningless because it's during football season. Nobody even pays attention. Same with hockey. Preseason football, it didn't used to be this way when teams would play their starters in the preseason games for at least a quarter and then maybe a half and then sometimes into the second half. But once most teams went to, maybe a series or two, but it's all about protecting for the regular season opener, it became an unwatchable product. And Cincinnati went with starters last night. Zach Taylor mixing it up. They've had so many slow starts to their regular season. He's like, well, we're going to play our starters in the preseason games. And Washington gets Cincinnati on Monday Night Football next week in their second preseason game, and really probably the most important of the preseason games, even though the third preseason game is a full 2 weeks before the regular season starts. So you can treat that game like the old third preseason game, but teams haven't done that. They've treated the second preseason game that way. Anyway, be nice to see football on TV. Here's why I'm going to watch, because I have to. But in terms of like the roster, I'm really interested to see Jalen Lane. All right. This was a player picked in the 4th round out of Virginia Tech. Kingsbury apparently not very impressed with Virginia Tech's offense last year, and you see that a lot at the college level. You see players that, could be great wide receivers that played in an offense that was run-based and didn't have a quarterback that could throw the football. I've been, excited to see Jalen Lane as a punt returner. Washington hasn't gotten field-flipping returns here for a few years. It'd be nice to have special teams other than their coverage, which was outstanding last year. Their coverage was great, except for in the Dallas game on kickoff returns. But I'm excited to see Jalen Lane. I've heard some very good things about his obvious quickness, his ability to separate as a receiver, his versatility as a receiver, and I'd like to see him as a punt returner. I think we might tonight. So I'm excited to see him. I do want to see Josh Connerly Jr., see what he looks like as a professional player on the field. It would be great if the Patriots played some of their starters for a little bit to get a true measure of what they're going up against. Very interested to see what Ben Sinnott is in his second year. These are opportunities for young players to make an impression. Sometimes it's against players that aren't going to be playing in the league. And so the coaches understand that. They know what they're looking at. Did that team play a player that's going to be in the NFL that was lined up opposite Ben Sinnott in coverage or opposite Ben Sinnott as a blocker? They understand that. No teams are game planning at this stage, which is a big part of why you see what you see. But I want to see Ben Sinnott because I think that he's a guy that Quinn has mentioned without being prompted to mention him on at least 3 different occasions during training camp. And look, he's the heir apparent. But right now, Zach Ertz appears to be Jaden Daniels' favorite guy. But I do want to see what Ben Sinnott has. And I think a lot of you, I'm interested to see what old Bill Krosky Merritt can do. What can Bill Merritt do as a 7th round running back? And, I want to see the vision that you see on tape from New Mexico in particular. They didn't play anybody in that one game that he played in against Arizona. So interested to see him. We've seen some running backs, and it tends to be running backs in preseason games that have, really performed. The guy last year that they had, Wiley, I thought he looked good. We've seen Rodriguez look pretty good in preseason games. We know what Rodriguez is anyway at this point. We just don't know what they think of him, not as much as maybe some of us. So I'm looking forward to seeing Merritt. Defensively, the guy that I'm curious about is Kane Medrano. He is a football player and a playmaker. He has that incredible, you see it from college, and that's something that totally translates to the NFL. The, anticipation talent, like he sees it and he's able to make plays on balls. Now, he was not a great tackler at times. And is he more linebacker? Is he more safety? Is this his year? Probably not. Will he make the team? I hope he does. I have a feeling he will, and he'll be there, as potentially a special teams player. And then, defensively, it's hard really without your starters playing to see what the, Deron Payne, Johnny Newton, Kinlaw, rotational piece or Goldman looks like, Dietrich Wise with Armstrong. We know what Luvu is. We don't have to see him in a preseason game. And that leads me to this, like the players that I don't need to see. And look, I love Doc more than anybody in this business. And Doc used to say, you haven't busted a grape. You haven't won anything. So I'm playing everybody in these games. Well, now they have won something, 14 games last year, NFC Championship. They didn't win the Super Bowl. I get that. But I think we learned enough about a few players. I don't need to see Jaden Daniels in a preseason game. I think these joint practices are more important for him and Debo. Are we going to see him next Monday night against Cincinnati for a series or two? Maybe. I don't need to see him. I certainly don't need to see Austin Eckler in a preseason game. I don't need to see Brian Robinson Jr. in a preseason game. I don't need to see Ertz in a preseason game. I don't need to see any of the old guys in preseason games. Okay, I don't really need to see Tunsil. I don't need to see Debo. I don't need to see Von Miller. I don't need to see Luvu. I don't need to see Wagner in these preseason games. I think Sanderstil, we've seen enough of Mikey Sanderstil to know he's going to be on the field a lot. So I've given you kind of what I will be looking at and then what I don't want to see in terms of players. And as always, I mean, the caveat to all of these preseason games, just nobody get hurt. Nobody have a Rashawn Slater type of disastrous injury. That can happen in practice just as easily as it can happen here. Not just as easily because they're playing football tonight. They're playing tackle football tonight with a clock and with referees and uniforms and everything. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. If you're going to watch tonight, what are you looking for? Max, do you have an answer?
Yeah. I mean, I'm excited to see how much depth that we kind of have in terms of players, but well, obviously, but the wide receiver position, I want to see how much depth we have there. That's something I'm very interested in. I want to see more of Ben Sinnott, less Cole Turner, just because I've seen enough Cole Turner. And then on the defensive side of the football, I'm kind of intrigued to see if they do anything with Will Harris tonight, just because he is new, probably needs a little bit. And I kind of want to see his versatility, because Dan Quinn talked about, like, he can play corner, he can play strong safety, we can put him at linebacker. He's done it all. So I am interested to see kind of what Will Harris does just as a defensive back sicko. Carlin Vigors, I'm excited to watch. Kane Medrano, as you said, I want to see.
You're excited to watch Carlin Vigors.
Excited is a strong word.
Why?
Linnell and I have been talking about just his ball skills and his tracking. And, like, I want to see just kind of where, I don't know, if he can make the team, has it up to snuff. I want to see a bunch of guys, like I want to see Trey Amos and him and how they cover like,
Trey
guys
Amos.
like,
I forgot to mention him. If he's on the field, I'll be excited to watch him. It would be great if he's matched up against Stephon Diggs for a series or two.
Stephon Diggs, or even you've raved both on and off air about Kyle Williams. So I'm interested.
Probably more slot.
Yeah. So I'm interested to see in how, guys get moved around and do all that. But also I want to see if Javon Kinlaw gets any run at all. I probably not, considering how much money they're paying him, but hey, new guy. I want to see Johnny Newton play a little bit. So that's kind of what I'm looking at tonight.
You're the first person and maybe the last person that will talk about Carlin Vickers.
No, trust me.
But
Linnell Willingham has brought up Carlin Vickers.
Well, Linnell was breaking down Wizards Summer League games.
This is
so let's
true.
not forget that.
He's a true sicko.
I love Linnell. Was listening briefly to him last night. He's excellent. Mike in Maryland. Mike, tell me why you're going to watch tonight if you're going to watch.
Well, I'm watching tonight because I want to see these Adam Peters draft picks do something. Luke McCaffrey, for example, I got to see him make a flash. Ben Sinnott, I got to see him make a flash. We're talking about, not paying Terry, and it's fine. I'm kind of in the middle. I want Terry to do is get his money, but I would like the team to do their thing because we have momentum going into the season. But, let's see these draft picks. I know it's only year 2 into into their careers, but if we're not seeing flashes right now, I mean, Jalen Lanes are going to overtake Luke McCaffrey now. So what are we, I got to see these guys do something. That's where I'm at. So anyway, big fan of you, Kevin. Big fan. I'm 30 years old and, just want to say that. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the call. Last year's draft, just as important as seeing what we're seeing with this year's draft. Most drafts don't mature in year 1. Most drafts don't return in year 1. Last year, we had the good fortune of the first pick, Jaden Daniels, number 2 overall, not only delivering, but delivering sooner rather than later, super early. We also had Mikey Sanderstill deliver earlier than is typical. But want to see Johnny Newton this year. I've heard some very good things about Johnny Newton as a potential wrecker as a pass rusher. Like a guy with his athleticism and his quickness that could really be a difference maker as a pass rusher in particular. I've heard good things about Ben Sinnott, and I think some of what Quinn's, again, unsolicited said, gives me reason to believe that they like Ben Sinnott. There may not be that opportunity for him this year because Ertz is still playing at a high enough level and has great chemistry with the quarterback. We saw enough from Brandon Coleman to know that he can play. We'll see where he ends up on the offensive line. Luke McCaffrey, Jordan McGee, Hampton, John Baptiste. These are the guys. How many of them are going to make the team for a second straight year? All of those guys made the team. They had 9 draft choices last year make the team. They only have 5 this year. I asked Ben the other day, will all 5 make it? And he said, yeah, they will. Connerly, Amos, Lane, Medrano, Bill Merritt, Krosky Merritt. But it's really, if you want to go back to the 23 draft, well, Forbes is already gone. This should be potentially a breakout year for Quan Martin, who's already been a starter. And the only person left is Chris Rodriguez from that draft. And I like Rodriguez every time he gets in there. There's something that we've been missing with Rodriguez. If you're going to watch tonight, tell me why. Derek in Capitol Heights. Derek, go ahead.
Hey, good morning, Kevin. It's been a long time.
Hey, what's up, Derek?
Just like, good. Kevin, just like you said, it's just pleasing to have football back. I'm going to piggyback on the previous caller. Unfortunately, in this game of the NFL, you'll have injuries, and I'm interested to see what our depth looks like, specifically the defensive end position, punt return, kick return, obviously wide receiver, and running back. So that's pretty much why I'll be watching tonight.
Thanks, Derek. Appreciate it. There's something interesting about special teams play in the preseason. I'm interested in watching Jalen Lane to see what if you paid attention to him at Virginia Tech or you watched a lot of the highlight stuff. A lot of it was as a returner, And I thought his vision in an open field as a returner was almost better than it was as a receiver. And he's got that vision, that acceleration. But preseason games is when it comes to special teams, the guys that are going to be on special team units in regular season games don't play special teams in the preseason unless you're a young player that ends up making the team because of special teams. But remember, a lot of starters end up on special teams. They don't play special teams in the preseason. So that can be misleading with that. I remember I'd have to go back to it. Brian's a good guy to ask about that because Brian, back then when he played, players that were going to play on the special teams in the regular season played on the special teams in preseason, but they don't play on teams in the preseason. You end up getting, let's say, on a coverage unit, half starters, half backups. Let's go to Chris in Delaware. Chris, if you're going to watch tonight, tell me why.
Thanks for taking my call, Kev. It's kind of the start of the season. You get to see your team in the colors again. That's number one. The obvious reason everyone's already touched on, you want to see these heir apparent young draft picks from this year, also the draft picks from last year, how these guys are coming along. I think one of the more intriguing things, though, is to see how the coaching staff has laid this ethos out. And you saw it just blossom last year. And it starts now in terms of how these guys get them prepared, and not in sense of game planning, but get them off the field, get them on the field, different play packages. It's always intriguing to me to when you have a team that's really disorganized, and I don't think that's what we are. When you see that in every game, whether it's preseason or regular season. So I think it'll be very comforting.
That's a really good point. That's a good point. Leave Chris there, Max. I don't want to cut him off. But I don't want to forget this because I remember last year saying about the first few preseason games, there seems to be an energy level, an enthusiasm level. You said, you talked about the ethos. Like there was an atmosphere that just looked different from the previous regime. That's coaching, man. That is coaching. And that is culture creation. That's I like to see that even this time of year. Because if it's not happening this time of year, oftentimes you don't see it when it really counts. It doesn't mean the results matter. It's just the overall, what level of urgency, what level of enthusiasm, if they pick the right kind of people, are they getting them to play hard? That's one thing I thought we saw all season long, even when they weren't very good on defense. I never felt like it was effort or energy. That's a really good point about something to look for tonight. What else do you have?
Just adding to that, some of the other guys, Dan Quinn has always preached having, players who are kind of the Swiss Army knife. He likes, their fungibility across the board. And
right.
One guy that sticks out to me is Kane Medrano.
Yeah, me too.
As a pick, initially, I was like, he's a little undersized for a linebacker, and he doesn't seem fast enough to be able to drop in coverage. So, to that same point, like, how are they going to maybe use him? What spots are they going to put him in? Is he going to play inside or out? Are they going to have him rushing? Like, what is he doing? So it's just going to be curious to see. And I realize it's not going to be – they're not showing all their cards with a player like that. But they have to start somewhere. We have to see him play in some capacity. So that'll be a guy I'll be looking forward to seeing.
I've never done that. I've never done this before, but I'm going to do it right now because you brought up Medrano and I like him. I'm predicting that Kane Medrano has an interception in this preseason. It might happen tonight with who's the backup quarterback? Who did Gerretti say? Is it Josh Dobbs?
Yes, it is Josh Dobbs.
Yeah. He's going to pick off Josh Dobbs tonight. Or he's going to pick off whoever the backup in Cincinnati is. Or it might be the third game. But he's going to make a play or two when he's out there because that's all he did in college. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate the call. If you want to jump on, we've got an open line, 301-230-0980. If you're going to watch tonight, tell me why. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
All right, we got some Commanders football tonight. They are back. They play the New England Patriots in their first preseason matchup. It is Tom Brady's statue night. No Jaden Daniels tonight, only some key starters that might see some action. Sam Hartman reported to get the start kickoff around 7:30. Meanwhile, the Colts quarterback battle just got a little bit more interesting as Anthony Richardson suffered a dislocated pinky on his throwing hand last night in a preseason matchup versus Baltimore. He'll be evaluated to see if he can make the start next week after Daniel Jones played the majority of yesterday's snaps. Plus, 11 days after signing a massive contract extension to make him the highest paid left tackle in football, Rashawn Slater has a ruptured patella tendon and will miss the entire 2025 season, a big blow to that Chargers offensive line. Plus, the Nats, they fall in a shutout loss yesterday to the A's by a score of 6-0. Mitch Parker earns the loss, giving up 6 hits and 4 earned runs, just 3 hits for the Nats, as the bats have been pretty cold as of late. Tonight, Nats kick off a road trip in San Francisco. Jake Irvin likely to get the start. First pitch is at 10:15. Nats on deck with Charlie and Dave at 9:45. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1 and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the streams and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
Ben's got some information on the Terry McLaurin contract standoff. He's going to join us in 9 minutes. He'll share that with us, so stay tuned for that. Right now, 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. If you're going to watch tonight, tell me why. Why are you going to watch the game tonight? What are you going to be looking for? I liked Chris's call. I think that is one of those things. Look, it's more important, I think, with a new coaching staff. I remember last year specifically after the Jets game, Miami game, saying, you know what's different is there's like a sense of urgency. There's a sense of energy. And you can notice that just as a fan. And this time of year, you don't get that from everybody. And I thought there were early signs that that they had nailed it with Quinn. And then I was reminding myself during the break that the Tampa game, and it was brutally hot, the opener last year. Remember how hot and humid it was? It really looked like they ran out of gas, and they didn't have a ton of energy by the time we got to that second half of that game. Week one, man, always a major, major head fake. It is every single year. Let's go to Mark in Largo. Mark, if you're watching tonight, why?
I'm watching to see Bill Merritt. I'm also watching to see Ja'Cory Brooks and Jalen Lane and see how they do. Kevin, I have a question for you, though, and I think this is a fair question that everyone is not talking about. I think it's the elephant in the room.
Mark just keeps – this is what he does. Mark, you got your own program when you call in. I don't mind it.
Oh, my God.
But you answer the question quickly, and then you say, Kevin, I've got a question for you. How many questions do you have for me today?
No, just one.
Okay,
and
go ahead and ask it.
Look, I love Luke
You're
McCaffrey.
so predictable.
I love Luke McCaffrey big time. I do. I love Luke. But if you see Jalen Lane and you see a Ja'Cory Brooks play better in practice and better in the games, I'm not saying Luke is going to get cut. That's far-fetched. I'm not. But don't you think it's kind of hard to say you're going to put Luke above those two when clearly those two look like they're better for the scheme of the offense than Luke, and they're still really trying to find a niche for Luke, which I think is these 3 games are huge for him because I love this kid and I want to see him excel and do well. But when you have Jalen Lane doing punt return, and if he excels, and you have Ja'Cory Brooks, who's undrafted, who may get on the team because of Noah Brown's injury bugs and stuff, don't you think that's a little bit of concern? If you look with the side eye,
what are we concerned about? If better players beat him out for the 4th wide receiver spot, I mean, we want them to pick the best players, right?
I would agree.
Are you just going to? Is it just because you're going to look at it and say they really whiffed with a 3rd rounder? I mean, 3rd rounders you whiff on a lot of the time.
Well, that's true too. That's true too. You got a point there. You do have a point. But that's what I'm looking for, and that's all my questions I wanted to ask you, buddy.
Yeah.
Have a good one.
I will tell you personally, I don't think what we see during these preseason games will be determining factors or major determining factors. I think when it comes to a Jalen Lane or a Luke McCaffrey or a Ja'Cory Brooks, I think they've already got a strong sense of how it will play out. Now, practices, another joint practice with the Ravens. Yes, 3 preseason game opportunities can influence. It can. But I bet you between off-season activity and 2 weeks of training camp, they already have a pretty good idea of who it is that's going to fit into the, group of 6 receivers, typically 6, right? And Lane's going to be one of them for sure because he's going to be their punt returner. Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, for me, every year it's all about rookie debuts. Obviously last year getting to see Jaden was, the biggest thing to look forward to.
Yeah, that was as anticipated a preseason game as we've had in years. Yeah, no doubt.
That's right. That was when he permission to buzz the tower and he went deep to Diami.
Yeah, he didn't have permission, you mean?
Or he didn't have permission. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, just looking at the rookies and just seeing if they're doing kind of the little things right. And again, it kind of, like the previous caller says, goes back to coaching, preparation, and everything. But just looking to see, Bill Merritt, breaking through tackles when he can actually be taken to the ground, not in training camp where they're just kind of popping you. So I want to see them with some real action, seeing them do the little things right. I want to see more right than wrong. Don't care about the score. And I love that you're as high on Kane Medrano as I am. I mean, I think he's probably going to make the most impact probably on special teams to start, but I really believe he can probably develop into something. I mean, just looking at him, he just looks tough and physical. I mean, he's got a tough and physical name even to him. It's just everything about him just seems cool. But again, we don't know anything until we see him actually on the field. And then just, Trey Amos and Bill Merritt. Those are the main. Oh, and Jalen Lane. So those are the main ones, but mostly it's a rookie night.
Yeah, you made a good point, and I think we've talked about it earlier in the week. But in a game, just like in the joint practice the other night, they can tackle, Krosky Merritt, Bill. He hasn't, all of the my God, this might be Walter Payton incarnate, had happened when they weren't tackling him. There's a big difference when the player can be tackled versus not tackled. So you'll see, can he make people miss? Then can he run somebody over? Does he go down with a little, contact, or does he run right through it? The Medrano thing, just so you know, for me, the excitement isn't over his physicality. The excitement is over his playmaking ability for me. What you saw at UCLA is one of those guys that just he's watching quarterback's eyes. He's reading the field. He just has that knack of, he's going here and I'm going to jump it, and making play after play that way. And wouldn't surprise me if he makes a play in one of these 3 preseason games. That's first ever preseason prediction. Kane Medrano has an interception in the preseason. All right, Ben Standig has some information on Terry McLaurin's contract standoff. He'll join us next. Ben has tweeted recently about the Terry McLaurin contract. We're going to get to that with him pretty much right off the top. But real quickly, before we get to that, give me your prediction on this year's preseason hero. This year's, Marco Mitchell. This year's Robert Davis. This year's Mac Brown. This year's, oh my God, I'm forgetting the Georgetown prep running back. And this the guy that was here for a while that everybody was convinced was going to be the guy. Forgetting his name now. Who's the preseason hero? Who are we going to be talking about at the end of this preseason?
Well, in light of I was listening to one of your callers earlier, I'm just going to sort of pile on just for fun to annoy you. How about Carlin Viggers?
Are you being serious, though?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
I mean, obviously it's a cornerback, and who knows how it works. But I will say that, you're watching practice and, there's 90 guys. It's hard to remember exactly who everybody's number is. They keep changing rosters around. So
right.
But I keep seeing 22 at corner making plays, and in my head I'm just sort of like, okay, I think that's one of the normal guys. It looks like and then I realized, wait a minute, this is an undrafted free agent. So
this is Carlin Viggers.
Yeah, and he's 6'2". He's built like a guy you would think in a Dan Quinn defense. Well, I look back when they signed the UDFA class. I ranked him. He was my number 2 guy behind Ja'Cory Brooks. So, he's been interesting. And I think that 6 cornerback slot is open. And, he's been interesting enough that I could see them saying, hey, let's keep him. But in terms of the offense, because that's typically one of the guys.
Yeah, that's typical. I was going to say, we typically don't have Marcus Mason was the name I was trying to pull. We typically don't have that preseason hero, the Babe Laufenbergs, the Marco Mitchells, the Mac Browns, the Marcus Masons come from the other side of the football. So give me the offensive guys. Is it going to be Bill?
Well, I mean, that seems like a little almost like 2 on the nose at this point,
I don't care.
Look, if he gets the work, I think, we could expect to see a pretty good role. I mean, now look, of course, who's on the offensive line, there's 100 other variables, but yeah, he's obviously looked good. I'll give you a guy that I think has got a real chance here, and that is a guy who's actually been around for a minute, and that's Kaz Allen. This is year 3 of, sort of being teased by this explosiveness and what he can do. And again, you look at this offense, they were missing the big chunk plays last year. Now, we think that maybe, Bill is going to help them with that, and they obviously had Deebo Samuel. But, we keep talking about who's going to be at receiver. I still don't love the 6th receiver, no matter who you kind of tell me it is. And another caller I know mentioned Luke McCaffrey's, we'll see where he's at kind of deal. Kaz Allen was a receiver. Now he's not like a real, he's not a big guy. They shifted him to running back on purpose. But if he can play a little receiver on top of the running back, on top of returner, that might be the type of versatility that they kind of need right now. So if he has popped a couple things in preseason this year, I could see him sticking around.
Yeah, I think we've talked about Kaz Allen every preseason since he joined the team, which was 2023, because coaches were talking about him, including coaches on Ron Rivera's staff. And I think, and I'm looking this up right now, I think he holds the high school scoring record for one season. It's here it is. He had 72 total touchdowns in 2017 as a high school player, 62 rushing touchdowns, 9 reception touchdowns, and a kickoff return. That is a high school record for touchdowns in a season. And he was, exciting as a returner at UCLA. So, yeah, okay, I like that as a player that could play. I mean, we're getting to the point here pretty soon where Kaz Allen can't land on the practice squad anymore, although they changed the rule on that a few years ago, I think.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, there's probably more running backs than, realistic are going to stick. But again, with the questions at receiver, if they only keep 2 quarterbacks, et cetera, maybe there's an opening. And, this is the type of deal, if they want more of that, playmaking ability all over the field, including special teams, then, a guy like Kaz Allen makes sense. I mean, look, they also have Jalen Lane. You mentioned him. I think he's in line to be the punt returner. He could be involved on the kicks as well. You've got Deebo Samuel can handle kicks. They have options on guys. if they want to. So you don't have to keep somebody for that. But, again, that speed, that I think that's, again, an element that this group hasn't even had. I think the one question would be, depending on when Terry returns, assuming that he does, where is he at with, with game shape? And then the same thing with like Noah Brown. Where is he at? If there's any concerns there, maybe they then have to keep a more traditional receiver. But, otherwise, I think Allen's interesting.
Yeah. All right, let's get to Terry. You tweeted something out in the last hour. Tell everybody what you've learned.
Well, I mean, it's more just that, I know that everybody's been kind of going with this Jeremy Fowler story the last 24 hours or so, saying that the Commanders, and the Terry side maybe like, as much as like $8 million or so apart. And I just was looking back at some of the things I wrote back right when Terry first didn't report. And one thing I had was that, I talked to somebody who was familiar with the situation, not part of either side, said that what he had heard was that Washington's first offer was below T. Higgins, which is 28.7 and possibly significantly below. So that's kind of helped shape my thinking through all this. If it's significantly below, then, what are we talking about? 25 million? If we're talking 25 million or, 26, that's barely above what Terry was making the last 3 years on average. So that, I know so many people are focused on what the Terry side is looking for. If their side's looking for 33 and Washington's at, 28, then, this seems like they could easily find a middle ground around 30. But if you're talking 33 to 25, that is a big difference. And that is the type of number where, based on how Terry was reacting when he first spoke about this with us a few weeks ago at the Eastern Motors commercial shoot, then, that almost makes a little more sense if they really did come in that low. And again, I don't know that for fact, but that was just, it just reminded me that this is where, I was at with the situation from the jump. And, again, I don't know that report is accurate or not, but it falls in line to a degree with, what I had heard from the beginning.
So Jeremy Fowler ended up sort of updating what he had said early yesterday morning.
Okay.
And on a podcast, and he said, it's probably more around 25. So to your point, let's go with 33, which is Metcalf, and 25. That's a big divide. You also tweeted out that you, one NFL general manager said to you that if I'm a betting man, Metcalf's terms is what they want, meaning Terry's side, but I don't think anyone else will give it to him. That no one else out there would give Terry a DK Metcalf style deal, correct?
Yeah, I mean that was the sentiment from that one GM, and others have said the same. And this is for anybody who's saying that Terry is done here, he's not going to play anymore, what have you. If they're going to trade him, let's just say that another team is willing to give Washington draft compensation or player compensation they think is worthy. They then still have to go sign the guy, presumably for a contract $30 million or up. That's so that's a lot to give up. Assuming that Washington's taking more than just like a late round pick, that's a lot to give up. And I don't know that there's a team out there that's going to be willing to do that. Not that Terry isn't good, but again, that's just a lot to have to do. And especially it's happening like right now. Teams are largely set on what they plan to do unless they have some injury or some big gaping hole.
Yeah.
It's not maybe they want to see where they're at mid-season, but right now I think most teams are probably feeling okay with what they have.
Yeah, I think, nothing about the last 24 hours, including what you've just said, changes my mind in terms of a trade being close to a 0% chance. Has anything over the last 24 hours changed the way you feel about trade?
No, I'm still of the impression that there's nothing, they're not going to trade him. Like I said, the interesting thing is, without knowing exactly how far apart these sides are, what does it mean for the Terry side to accept sort of where Washington's at, or Washington to pinch up a little bit? Because if we are talking a number that's that below 28 million, I don't know. Is Terry going to be like, I want this? No, maybe he's like, look, I'll just play out the year. Don't tag me. I don't know if they can make them do that, but let's get through this.
Well,
but
they
I'm not
can't.
going to
That would be an update to the contract. There's nothing in there that says that they can't tag him next year.
Yeah,
let's go back
like
to
some sort of an agreement. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the team wouldn't do that. That ruins a lot of their leverage and their flexibility for 2026. So let's go back and let's just assume that the initial offer was 25. All right. Just again, and I mentioned this earlier in the show, that puts him at Devontae Smith level. That puts him basically somewhere in the top 13 salaries at the position in the NFL as average annual. We don't know what the guaranteed is. Why do you think they offered him that?
Well, I mean, I guess they think that's, based on all the things we've discussed, age, ability, everything they view about him as a receiver compared to the others. This is where they feel he's worthy. It's worthy money. I personally am not a fan of just saying player X got paid this, therefore this player should get paid equal or more. I mean, I think Pittsburgh overpaid for DK Metcalf. Is that Adam Peters' fault now? He's got to pay Terry McLaurin up? I don't think so. But again, if you're talking, he's making $23.2 million the last 3 years on average, and you're only going to 25 when he just is coming off. Not only is he a second-team All-Pro, career high 13 touchdowns. Several of them were, huge plays late in games. He's the number one target for your quarterback. Like this feels like a very odd decision to make, and not to mention, most of the time fans will lean towards management and maybe put a little bit of a selfish blame on the player. I don't think that's completely happening here. I mean, some are, but
I think it may have been happening. I don't think it's happening anymore, but it might happen now. It might shift back to Terry because we now have an idea from a couple of credible reporters, you included, that, the opening salvo from the team was lower than we even thought. And it was not, it was basically $2 million more a year on average. But you still haven't answered the question. I mean, let's contemplate this. Why? It says something about something, because if they think that's the value, then that's where they think he is. He's like the 13th best receiver in the game, and the age, or maybe it's the 10th best, but with the age, it drops him back. And that's kind of where it is for them. That's what they think is fair. Or it could be that they don't want to pay a lot of money out right now. They don't want to pay 65 million, up front or at signing. They'd rather pay as they go and have flexibility next year to use the tag. And yeah, they lose him in 27 but that's his age 32 season. I've mentioned that as a possibility. They may have done a deal at 25 million a year, 26 million a year, maybe come up a little bit, but really the pay as you go might be a better financial situation for them.
Sure, but I mean that's a whole now we're just back to the Kirk Cousins days where
but that's a quarterback at 26 years old. Big difference. They screwed that up.
My point, yes, but they screwed up not just the money, they screwed up the relationship. And if you're going to play this game with Terry McLaurin, you're screwing up the relationship. Hopefully, if they can re-sign him, extend him, then they haven't already. But why would you do that? I mean, because again, for this guy in particular, I just think that's a really tough look just to make an argument that he's only getting a $2 to $3 million a year raise over what he just got. Again, 30 is a number, but it's not a definitive number. He's not been hurt. He's been very productive. He's a locker room guy. All these things. It just seems like a very odd way for them to look at it. Now, again,
let me interrupt. How would screwing up the relationship, if it's true, how would that manifest itself?
I mean, look, Terry's, seems to be a pretty stand-up guy, but I don't know. He's going to have hard feelings. Is he going to say things now that maybe he wouldn't? Is he going to be less likely to sort of, help out, so to speak, put himself out there in ways that he didn't before because he doesn't feel like the team organization
that would hurt him too.
What's that?
That would hurt him too.
Well, I mean, sure, but that's my whole point. Like when we say the team has the leverage, that doesn't mean you take you pile drive the guy to the mat during the negotiation. Like, the Eagles had the leverage of Saquon Barkley, and they still ripped up the deal and gave him the deal they got. I understand.
Terry's not Saquon Barkley.
But it's not the point. He is here. I mean, other than James Daniels, he's arguably the most important guy on the team.
He isn't here. He's not Saquon Barkley here.
It's not my point. The point is, in context of the team that they have, he is a very valuable guy. And if you're really going to again, the whole thing, if you're going to define what it means to be a commander, go tell me that he's not on the poster. So, you can't kind of have it both ways and say, we value these things, but we're not going to then pay this guy who defines all of it and, has been here and whatever. So I don't know. I mean, that's the part. If they really are offering him that low, that's the fascinating part. Why? Again, I don't believe they should pay him $33 million a year just because DK Metcalf got that. But there's also something to be, said for being reasonable. I just don't get how that would be. You'd be getting such a low number or offer. And apparently if it is that they're sticking with it, considering what he's done and where this team is at right now, that just seems to be very odd to me.
Yeah, the why is really interesting. And look, I recognize that while the team has all the financial leverage in this negotiation, it's very one-sided. There is some emotional leverage that Terry has had. I don't know if he squandered that over the last couple of weeks, but now that we know that the team's opening salvo offer may be perceived by many in the fan base to be lowballish. Maybe he gains some of that back, but I still don't know what that means. I still don't know how that manifests itself, because he has all the incentive in the world to go out and have a massive season. How does it affect the locker room when really at the end of the day, yeah, people care about this stuff. They count money. I get it. But they're also involved in their own situation. I'm just wondering if a lot of, the effects of not perception-wise treating Terry McLaurin the way a lot of people think he should be treated, how does that play out? Does it really affect the product on the field?
Well, let's be honest. If I told you CD Lamb wants a contract extension, Jerry Jones is doing just what they're doing, or what he always does, I guess, and not doing anything, and CD Lamb ultimately is like, all right, I guess I got to play on the 1 year left on his deal, wouldn't we be saying from the outside, boy, that's going to screw up the locker room? Boy, that's going to cause some waves. But that's what I'm saying. So, right,
but it feels different here with Terry because of what he is.
But that means you're taking advantage of it. If we're going to say that for CD Lamb or whoever, I'm not just mentioning him, but
they got a deal done though with CD, so we didn't have to see that play out.
My point is that if we look at ignore the player, then look at any other team and say the same receiver is doing the exact same thing as Terry, we would say, boy, that locker room thing is going to be rough. Because that's what we would all think, no matter what.
I know we would say that, but is it true? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Kevin, 99% of what we discuss, we can't prove to be true on anything. I have no idea. I don't know what Terry would do. I don't know what this human being.
I'm trying to get into their minds. I'm trying
to. That's why I don't get it.
Whether we talk about that, I wonder if they talk about that, if that's even a factor.
I mean, I'm sure it has to be. Again, you have the coach every single day discussing the idea of the kumbaya vibe that they have here. You can't have that and then say, well, we're going to make this guy unhappy because we're offering him a contract that's significantly less than what is even perceived to be standard market at this point. I mean, if you got 28, if you got the T. Higgins contract, that would still be viewed by a lot of people, probably Terry himself, as less than. And that's, again, if we believe the $25 million is accurate, that's more than that. So, I have no idea what they are thinking. That's why this is confusing. Of all the guys, it wasn't confusing to me that they decided to move on from John Allen. I could see that one a year in advance. I just can't understand why you'd be like, we're going to not pay Terry, put him in this weird position where we're going to tag him, we're going to do all these things. I don't get it. It seems like you could come up with a number for this guy that should not be that complicated. And again, you can structure it in ways that doesn't affect the Jaden situation much at all. So again, I also don't know what the Terry side is saying definitively. Right? Schefter the other day supposedly said he would guess they want something way above DK Metcalf. Is that accurate? I don't know.
Yeah, right.
If that's true, well, now you're really far apart, and that would be kind of nuts on the Terry side. So this is why I'm not like bagging on the team and saying that any of these reports are definitively accurate. Until we hear more, who's to say? But that I'm just saying, if that's the case, that would seem to be really low, if not ridiculously low, for the team to offer that.
Yeah, ridiculously low would have been the 23 that we heard yesterday morning. 25 is low. I mean, again, we don't really know what we're talking about because we just look at the list and we look at the players. But the why here is the most interesting thing to me because there are so many possibilities. They just don't love the player, as much as everybody else does. Or they like the player and they want the player and they need the player, but they actually think Jaden is going to elevate almost anybody to that level. What if it is financial in terms of really laying out 50 to 60 right now may not be the best thing for our ownership group. There's just a lot to contemplate.
I don't put the ownership thing in the discussion unless we know that this is like the Bengals and this is like standard operating procedure. If Josh Harris is saying don't spend because we have to outlay all this money towards the
I don't think that's happening. I'm just saying they have outlaid a lot of money over a 2-year period, and this is the first real big player outlay in terms of guaranteed money, guaranteed at signing, and it really is progressing very slowly.
Right. Okay. I mean, I guess the thing is we've spent the last year and change discussing how do you take advantage of the rookie quarterback contract. Well, you have this window. The window is going to close in 2 years in terms of that, and yet we're going to discuss not having Terry McLaurin in the right mindset to be as effective as possible. Again, that just seems short-sighted. But again, I don't know what the other side is offering. This is why this whole debate is, it's somewhat silly. We could all be talking out of our what's massively, but
we have more information today than we've had.
I don't know if we do.
Maybe
we have information that somebody put out there that I don't know. I mean, I have no idea what the number is. So again, just like I don't know that Schefter is accurate about going above DK Metcalf significantly, as he phrased it.
Well, you said the initial offer, you had somebody tell you the initial offer came in below T. Higgins. So that's probably somewhere in that Jeremy Fowler range.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I tweeted out because it sort of jives with what I'm at. But again, who knows? I mean, look, if the point all along has been if the team was at 28 and they were at 33, this is over. What are we talking about? Unless literally nobody will budge at all.
Or if they were at 25 and he was at 30, it's probably over.
Right. I mean, yeah. But if you're telling me that the gap is $8 million or more, well, then annually, then that's the problem.
But I'm just emphasizing that you put it in a way in which the team's lowballing, but Terry's asking for too much, in my opinion, too. I think both things are true. If that's the number.
3 years ago, he and DK Metcalf and AJ Brown all roughly were making the same. Now, 3 years later, I understand, AJ Brown won a Super Bowl, although he got an extension before that, and DK Metcalf, is this physical freak. But Terry had, it's not like there's been a drop off between the three. If we were putting their careers on a graph,
it's not a drop off; it's an elevation. AJ Brown's a much higher thought of player. He is in a different tier than Terry.
I get it. I'm saying in terms of the notion of asking for too much. If you're Terry's side, you're not going to take what you just said as a fact. You're going to say, well, what do you mean? Look at this guy just did. Our guy took a team that was projected to win like no games with a rookie quarterback and helped them get to the NFC Championship game, being the best guy that they had on offense all year. So, again, I don't know that the Terry side is like insane, but somehow it's bizarre that they appear to be still so far apart that they can't find a compromise when everybody seems to say that's what they want. So that's where it's just weird. And again, that's why it does make some sense to me that it may be a 25 versus a $33 million, that may be the gap. It's baffling to me that would be the case.
Yeah, baffling to you because of the 25, because more than anything else, it sounds like to me.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what percentage that is. Any of us at their jobs, I mean, maybe not you because, you're Kevin Sheehan, but most people, you get like that 3 to 5% raise. I mean, you're not thrilled.
Cost
but
of living.
Okay, Yeah, it's kind of the standard. I don't know what that is in terms of when you're making $23.2 million a year, but it seems like in terms of the NFL version of that, that's got to be way low. That doesn't seem like a reasonable raise to make. So even if you're saying we're not going to pay you 33, 25, if that's the number, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, one of the contracts is just a weird contract too to look at is the Mike Evans deal. You know, it seemed like he should have been due a lot more money than he made. Let me just say, pro sports, there's no cost of living increase. There's a lot of players don't get the opportunity to get this contract, as you know. Right. I'm not saying that, but you know, your point obviously is this is a player coming off the best season of his career. He's due more than just, you know, essentially a 10% raise, somewhere in that neighborhood. We are talking, of course, to Ben Standig, who, by the way, writes on Substack now. Ben also has a podcast, Last Man Standing, and you can follow Ben on X and on Twitter at Ben Standig. So, you know, we have gone from, because I think we've been sort of in lockstep on this. They're going to get this thing done. Certainly no worse than the beginning of camp. Even with the beginning of camp, not that concerned. It'll get done. You know, every day, every week brings more information, whether you believe it or not. It's information that's out there. So where are you today?
Well, I'm just sticking with they'll figure out a way to get it done because that's what history suggests. And, you know, I mean, ultimately, like I said, I feel like with Terry, I feel like they've gone down the playbook of the negotiation from the player side. And the next step is what? Actually sit out games. Well, now you know, I mean, not that he hasn't already cost himself some legit money, but now we're talking, you know, millions of dollars as opposed to, you know, a few $100,000. So that seems like a really rough way to go. So I would, you know, maybe it means ultimately just plays out the deal, but I still imagine he's going to be on this team week 1 and playing. But yeah, I mean, you know, we've now, you know, tonight will be the first preseason game. Obviously, we get past this. If you know, the Bengals game is about 10 days away, something like that. You know, there's a big gap there. If he's not signed by the time we get through the Bengals game, now I think my concern level is, you know, I was DEFCON 1 to DEFCON 5 always throws me, but
DEFCON 1's the worst.
Yeah. I don't know if we're DEFCON 1, but like we're on the DEFCON somewhere at that point.
I think I'm right about that.
I think you are.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean it's. You know, like I said, it's bizarre.
DEFCON 1, nuclear war is imminent, or it's already begun. DEFCON 5, lowest state of readiness. So you are at what on the DEFCON scale again right now?
I'm saying if we get past the Bengals game and nothing's happened, I'm at least on the DEFCON scale. I don't know where I'm at, but I'm at least
you're on the DEFCON scale. Okay.
Yeah.
I think we're all on it now. I mean, you can be at DEFCON 5. That's like, you know, the world's safe, and at least for our country, all is well.
But, you know, I mean, look, the other variable here is going to be at what point does the team look at their other receivers and think, oh, man, we maybe we don't have enough. Because, you know, it's not like Luke McCaffrey has, you know, had a quiet summer. It's not like I can look and say, boy, he's ready to fill in as, you know, a potential starter if need be for either Terry McLaurin or Noah Brown. The older vets, you know, last year, a lot of the older vets they brought in showed some good things. Can't say I've seen that yet. Maybe that changes tonight, but I hasn't seen that yet. So what are we looking at? Like, other than Deebo Samuel and Jalen Lane, who both are kind of playing the slot, what else do they feel comfortable with at outside receiver right now? So again, at some point, do they have to look at this and say, we have a big opportunity here? This is the year of the NFC.
You know,
it's deep, but it's not crazy high. It's not crazy at the top. We can do something, but we got to have this guy out here.
I keep coming back to something that I still believe as I'm sitting here, and I'm still in DEFCON 4. What's 4? Increased intelligence watch and strengthened security measures, above normal readiness. So I'm at DEFCON 4. I was at DEFCON 5 all along. But, you know, he's going to play. I just, everything that's practical, and maybe nothing practically has happened yet because it's gone against the odds. Us being where we are right now is against the odds of where they were, you know, a few months ago. So I think he's going to be there, and, you know, they've always known that because he's under contract to play this year. But if they saw this coming, or they had a clue that it could happen, they didn't do a very good job preparing for it. That would be a worthy criticism. They didn't draft a receiver until the 4th round. They didn't sign a receiver in free agency. There were receivers galore, in the first round. Remember, Igbuka went before, but there was certainly talk, and maybe they would have drafted Igbuka or Golden, or Burden was there. Who was my guy? Kyle Williams was there until the 3rd. But if they thought this was a possibility, even though they probably understood intellectually, he's going to play for us, even if it goes sour, these contract negotiations, because it's in his best interest and he's under contract. They didn't do a great job of preparing for it. You agree with that or not?
No, 1,000,000%. That's why when, in the notion of them saying that they think he's worthy of a $25 million, to pretend that would be acceptable seems to be, would be like, beyond naive, I would think, because who would think that, like, again, if we all discussed back in the season ends, we say, okay, DK Metcalf just got this, whenever that was, what's Terry going to get? And you said 25, you're like, what? We'd all be like, that's insane. Certainly the agents would think that's insane. So then
you're right.
You're right. That's where you're going to be. Okay. But then prepare for that reality. And again, that's the issue here. If they had drafted, instead of, say, Josh Connerly, a receiver, or instead of Trey Amos, a receiver, again, they need those guys too. But like, okay, now maybe a little more wiggle room. Now you have Deebo Samuel and this kid who looks to be pretty promising, and receivers come into the league often, more ready-made than they did years ago. So that would be one thing. But instead, they have Deebo Samuel, who, he's looked good, but we'll see where we get in the season. And Jalen Lane, okay, an interesting rookie, and then a bunch of guys who, Jaden Daniels will make guys better, but I don't know how much we're working with, considering the age and the injuries and all these things. So yes, they did not do a good enough job if they really were going to play this level of hardball and were willing to accept the ramifications.
Yeah. I think the why is the most interesting thing. All right. Exit question, not on him. Just tell me real quickly, who's playing tonight? No starters, right? What about rotational guys? What about Trey Amos? What about Javon Kinlaw? Who do you think will be in there tonight?
Well, last year, looks like they had 11 players who were inactive, and I'm sure there were a few others who were active. There's no inactive, but 11 guys who just didn't draft. And then I'm sure there were some other guys who drafted who maybe played a series, or maybe not even that. They obviously just have to have enough functional bodies. If you have 90 guys, if 20 sit, you still have a lot. So I'm going to guess almost none of the starters, nobody who's over 30, none of the guys that they have to sort of watch their odometers on. I think the rookies, though, at some point they have to make their NFL debut in a stadium and get used to game day, the ramp up and all that. I mean, you could do it next week, but I don't see why you wouldn't do it this week. We haven't, unless New England said something in the last couple hours, I haven't heard what they're exactly going to do, but it sounded more plausible that they would play some of their starters.
They're now a 6.5-point favorite, so somebody believes that they're going to play starters for a while.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, if that's the case, then sure, have Trey Amos go up against Drake May and those receivers. Have Josh Connerly go up against possibly some New England starters on the line and see how it goes. So I think the rookies play, and then after that, it's going to be a lot of backups, and I would think that anybody who's making again real money or the definitive starter or is older, I think those guys are all out.
All right, good job, appreciate it. I'll talk to you later.
Awesome, man. See ya.
Ben Standig, everybody. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Let's assume that it's 25 that the team offered and Terry's at 33. Why do you think the team went low? Why do you think they're stuck on low right now? Why? I mean, why, if you perceive this to be a low ball offer, even if it's an initial offer, why do you think they went this route? 301-230-0980. Phone lines are open. Kevin Sheehan Show. We're on the Team 980, the team980.com. We're also on our Team 980 YouTube channel. If you get there and watch us, subscribe button, hit that, and also hit the like button. By the way, if I didn't mention this on the show yet, last night, Cincinnati and the Eagles in the preseason game, Cincinnati basically played their starters for the first quarter, and they did a really good job offensively. Joe Burrow was 9 of 10 for 2 touchdowns. Jamar Chase, 4 catches, 77 yards, and a touchdown. But Tanner McKee, the backup quarterback in Philadelphia, started against Cincinnati's starting defense and shredded them in a half, 20 of 25, 252, and 2 touchdowns for Tanner McKee, 6th-round pick out of Stanford back in the 2023 draft. All right. I think we now have at least, believe what you want to believe, but let's just say that Jeremy Fowler, Ben's follow-up, that it's 25 Washington offered Terry McLaurin, and that Terry's asking for 33 a year. Easiest way to kind of, without the guaranteed money, the delta's $8 million, 25 million, 33. If you think Washington's offer was a lowballish offer, why do you think they did it? I think that's the most interesting thing, because there are a lot of possibilities, and I don't have the answer. One possibility is that's just what they think he's worth. They think he's top 13, 15 kind of a receiver in the league, or maybe like number 10 or 11 based on salary structure, but his age, they backed it up a little bit, but, or it's a better situation for them, contract flexibility, not necessarily cap flexibility, but in terms of paying as you go, to pay less over the next 2 years without a contract extension and not have to come out of pocket with it right now. Maybe that's it. They do have flexibility. He's got to play. They've got the tag they can use next year. Why? If you think it's a low ball offer, $25 million to Terry, why do you think they did it? I think it's a combination of what they really believe he's worth and maybe a desire to not give him a contract extension, that playing out the final year of his deal and then having the tag as a way they can go next year is cheaper, and it is much better from a cash flow standpoint. Skip in DC, go ahead. First of all, do you think 20, because I don't know that everybody's going to agree with this. Ben said it with a lot of certainty. I'm not sure everybody around the league would necessarily agree with certainty, but I think the fans will. So I'll ask you first, do you think that a $25 million average annual is a low ball offer to Terry McLaurin?
Absolutely. And Kevin,
okay.
I did a
So
deep
why did
dive
they do it?
I'm hoping it's because they're just trying to negotiate like they do in San Francisco,
mm-hmm.
and sign them at the end of camp for a compromised number. Now, I felt that Terry is worth every bit of $30 million a year. And I did a deep dive on the receivers, and I was surprised because we always assume, Terry's, he's somewhere around, number 10 or between 10 and 15, right?
Yeah.
Do you know, Kevin, he's the second fastest receiver among those grouped in the 10 to 15 range. Only
are you going off of his Ohio State 2018 40 time that he ran at the combine?
Do you think he's any less?
Not that much.
He might be
not that much.
Okay,
but I don't look at Terry and think of him as the burner in the NFL. Do you?
No, but I looked at the other receivers. And
okay.
He's faster than Justin Jefferson's time. He's faster than Jamar Chase.
He's nowhere near the receiver Justin Jefferson is. You would agree with that?
I'm just saying. I'm talking about speed.
But
okay,
that's one aspect of receiving. Did you know that he had one of the worst separation rates of starting receivers in the league for next gen last year? Which is one of the reasons maybe he led the league in contested catches. Which, by the way, is a good thing. I'm not saying it isn't.
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. So why do you think he can't get the separation?
I don't know. I
watch
watched Justin Jefferson, and it's a thing of beauty as a route runner.
I agree with you. I'm not comparing him to Justin Jefferson.
Okay.
I'm not. Trust me.
Right.
there's something about receiving.
So let's get to the why. Why?
Okay.
Why do you think
let
they're
me tell you
lowballing?
why I think it. Why I think it's a negotiation. I'm hoping because if they are stuck on not paying him at least $30 million, we've got a problem on this team, and I think a good case could be made that this is going to really hurt our team. I don't think we can make it to the Super Bowl without Terry McLaurin. I'm sorry, our defense is not good enough. Kansas City has a good defense. Okay, all right.
I think it limits. I think it limits the potential. I still think that this offense would have a chance to be a good offense and that they could still have a good season.
Kevin,
but clearly, their chances are better.
For a Super Bowl.
Their chances
I'm
are
talking
better
about having
with Terry
that
McLaurin.
X factor. Let me give you one other deep dive fact. Do you know that Terry McLaurin, size-wise, because there's really two different categories of receivers. There's guys that are shifty, and have speed, versus guys that are bigger. You can't really compare them. The bigger guys are going to get more catches. Okay, like the Mike Evans and the A.J. Browns. They can do more with their size. But amongst the Garrett Wilsons and all these other guys, including Jamar Chase, Terry is right around the same size as all these guys, but faster. Okay? Well, people don't understand that Terry McLaurin.
I don't know that the relevance is we've seen him. We're not projecting what Terry is going to be. We've got 6 years of Terry. We know what he is as a receiver. Fast, tall, not tall, big, not big. We know what he is, and we've watched enough Chase, Jefferson, Lamb, Metcalf, A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra, Tariq. We kind of have a good feel for what he is.
Yeah, but Kevin, comparing size, speed, and everything, a case could be made that he's not outside the top 10, that he's more 5 to 10. I think the biggest factor is age. The age is really the factor, and Terry's argument is he doesn't have wear and tear. Yeah. He doesn't have a history of injuries. So he's good for at least the next 2 years.
Yeah.
Which would get
by the way, you just answered what one of the possibilities for me. If they think he's really good for 2 years, he's under contract for one of them, and the franchise tag pays him 28.6. You blend it together, it's 44.1 for 2 years. That's less than what they've offered him in a long-term deal. So that would make more sense for the team.
About what this will do to the locker room, which I agree. It's not going to be good for the locker room, Kevin. If they
that's your opinion. Like that. I don't know that I have a strong opinion one way or the other. I think we overblow those things as fans. I think we completely overrate those things once the real games start. I think the bigger issue than locker room would be if it's really a hurtful situation. How does Terry himself handle it? Thanks. Appreciate it, Skip. I got to get some of these guys in. I'm running out of time. Jeremy, go ahead. Why do you first of all, do you agree that it's a low ball offer, 25 or not?
Listen, my ears are bleeding listening to that last call. That was the most irrelevant nonsense and waste of 5 minutes of my life talking about his
speed and size comparison stuff. Yes, we're not getting ready for a draft. Understood.
Listen, he answered the question because this is the reason why we're lowballing if you consider it a lowball offer. He's under control this year.
Yeah.
And we can franchise him the following year. And the reason we're lowballing is because we don't care in 3 years if Terry is on the team.
Yeah, that's a possibility.
Feelings, sorry about it. You know who we care about the most? Jaden Daniels. And if you're a Washington fan, and you brought up an excellent point, Cincinnati's defense got humiliated by a second string from Philly last. You know why I knew we were going to beat the brakes off of Detroit in the playoffs? Because their defense sucks. And you know why they suck? Because they can't invest any money. So look at Cincinnati. They're not a real contender. They have $65 million tied up into their receiving room, and rightfully so. They had to pay Chase because he's top 3 at the very least. The bottom line is, we do not care if Terry is in Washington. Nobody. If you are a fan of Washington in 27, if you are only concerned about winning a Super Bowl, Terry is a wonderful human being. He is a fantastic receiver. I don't give a damn if he's in Washington in 3 years if we're winning a Super Bowl. You know what I'm saying? Terry's got
Jeremy, I've suggested this as potentially what they're thinking all along. You're not wrong.
There-
The issue, what you're not taking into consideration is what a lot of people are taking into consideration, and I think maybe is a bit overblown, and that is the emotional, toll it will take by lowballing maybe the most popular player or one of the most popular players on the team.
Emotional toll on who? Jim from Arlington? I don't give it. You think Deron Payne is not going to try to tackle somebody harder?
Exactly.
Because
I think a lot of that's overblown too. Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Thanks.
The only person in that building we need to be concerned with
Jaden
is
Daniels.
Jaden Daniels.
Damn right about that part. Good call, Jeremy. Steve, Sam, everybody else on hold, stay there. We'll try to get a few more calls in after this break. All right, two quick calls we can get in here because we're up against the end of the show break. Steve's been on hold for a while. Steve, do you think it's a low ball offer, A? B, if so, why?
Yeah, I do, Kevin. How you doing? I do think it's a low ball offer, but at the same time, I understand why they're doing it. I think his age definitely takes a part of it, and I think that they're looking towards the future. I do disagree with the last caller. I think he's in that tier, maybe 11 to 15 top receivers.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put him in the top 10. I love Terry. I wouldn't put him in the top 10. The first caller with his speed and all this other kind of crap has nothing to do with it. Like, he's a good wide receiver. He is.
He's a really good receiver. Yeah, 100%.
He's a really good receiver. Is he a great one? No. He's not. To me, Jamar Chase is the best player in the NFL. That's to me. And I think Joe Burrow is the best quarterback in the league. At the same time, Cincinnati is not paying Henderson because whether he's on that team or not, they're not going to the Super Bowl. He's not going to make a big difference in that defense with just him. And for me, I kind of agree with Doc Walker. We need to address being able to stop the run and play in Philadelphia. With Terry or without him, I don't know if we beat Philadelphia. That's my thing. So, okay,
Thanks
Kevin, I'll hang up. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. I'm going to get one more in here. Sam's been on hold. Sam, finish it up for us. First of all, do you think he's being lowballed at $25 million average annual, and if so, why?
No, I think it's exactly what you said. They're paying what the market is, what they think he's worth, right? I believe your wife's a real estate agent. And when you buy a house, you have an appraisal. And they're doing their own little appraisal, and that's what they think that he's worth. Now, will they pay a little more because, what everyone keeps saying. He's a great guy and all that stand-up stuff, which I think is totally, overblown. I mean, sure, they'll pay a little more, but I think the way he threw up all over himself in that Eastern Motors, rant tells me that he's drastically over asking, and his camp is delusional. And I think that that's just where they think that he should be. Now, again, they might pay a little more, but I think he's asking way more than he thinks he's worth.
I think he's asking way more than what he's worth, and I think the team's $25 million, if it's true, is too low. I've said from pretty much the beginning it's somewhere between 28 and 30. But here's the bottom line. If they think Terry's got 2 really good years left in him, he's under contract for one of them, and they can use the franchise tag on him in the second one and pay less and pay as they go rather than shelling out $60 million. If the player doesn't like that, work that out with the next collective bargaining agreement. With that said, there's always been this part with Terry that it's a unique situation because of the kind of person he is and what he means to that locker room and that team, which makes it a little bit more interesting and not cut and dry just financial and just business. So we'll see. All right, that's it. I'm going to be be here Monday for sure. I'll also be doing a podcast after the game tonight if you want to listen to that. Chris is up next.